welcome to Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and this is the 1993 Menendez brothers trial. We are just at the very tail end of the defense's case, and with this, we're going to be watching the Oziel tape. So, Dr. Oziel, Jerome Oziel, he was the star witness for the prosecution. He was really only the only, I guess, expert witness that the defense actually or the prosecution actually put up. And his testimony was very problematic, and he didn't answer questions, directly. He was very evasive. There was he also his ethics come into play because he was tape recording sessions with the brothers while they were confessing to the homicides of their parents. However, they didn't know that they were being tape recorded with Judalon Smith, his mistress, in the other room. So tell me how any of that makes sense. I feel like he really tried to insert himself somehow into this case, especially with everything that he did with Judalon, and he really tried to make give himself publicity through this case. So, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, let's get to it. So this is the Oziel tape. We're going to be listening to Dr. Oziel and the boys on this tape, along with hearing it interspersed with expert testimony. Most of it's going to be Dr. Ann Burgess, who was I would say probably the defense's star expert. She was on the stand for several days, and we did about 4 parts, I think, of her testimony. But she also, obviously, we haven't completed it because she's going to talk about this tape. So we haven't done the tape yet. This is just exclusively all about the tape. So we're going to hear from Ann Burgess and Dr. Conti, he's another trauma expert, especially when it comes to CA and SA. And so it's Ann Burgess. She's a nurse. She helped institute like the whole FBI profiling because of her research and knowledge, basically, because she was a nurse and she helped treat patients that were victims of SA or any kind of abuse. And because of that, she knew the effects of it. She knew the trauma that came from it. She knew how her patients would react to traumatic situations, and the more of the psychological aspects that were involved, because that part is the damaging part, the psychological part, and nobody was looking at that at that time. So she was really instrumental in taking a look at the victimology. She actually teaches a course in victimology. So, I mean, she literally wrote the book on victimology. So anyways, we're going to hear from Burgess and Conti, and let's get to it. Sorry, here we go.
Did you have your own copy, in fact, of the tape?
Yes, I did.
Now, you did not have that before you testified last time.
That's correct.
And have you listened to the tape recording?
Yes, I have.
How many times have you listened to it?
At least 5 or 6 times.
And in listening to it those 5 or 6 times, did you develop, in your mind, an analysis of that particular tape?
Yes, I did.
Who are the voices, to the best of your knowledge, on that tape?
There are 3 voices on the tape. There's Dr. Oziel, there's Erik Menendez, and Lyle Menendez.
And in your listening to that tape, were you paying any particular attention to what's known as the interaction between those 3 people?
Yes, I was.
Now, were you in court yesterday in order to listen to the testimony of Judalon Smith?
Yes, I was.
And did you learn additional information concerning the making of the tape of December 11th, 1989 by hearing Ms. Smith testify?
Yes, I did.
And what information that you heard from Ms. Smith yesterday was at all important or significant in your evaluation and analysis of this tape?
Objection, improper opinion.
Not asking for an opinion, Your Honor.
Well, let's break it down. You're asking for things that she considered from Ms. Smith's testimony?
Exactly, Your Honor.
All right, without characterizing it in any particular way.
Right.
Why don't you ask it then?
Okay, what facts, if you will, that Ms. Smith testified to, did you consider in formulating your evaluation of this tape?
One of the facts was the point that Dr. Oziel wanted the voices of the brothers on tape. That was an important factor.
Okay.
And that it was made at his request. It's a second factor.
And was there anything about the time frame at which this tape was made that was significant?
Yes, there was the time frame, I believe, was from 4 in the afternoon till close to midnight, about 8 hours.
And do you know how long the actual tape part is?
I believe the tape part is about 48 minutes.
And with respect to the taped part, how does this tape begin?
This tape begins in the middle of a conversation, and it begins with Erik Menendez speaking.
And how does it end 48 minutes later?
It ends essentially with Lyle Menendez. It just ends. It doesn't have any concluding statement or anything. It says end of tape.
Does it end mid-sentence?
Yes, it does.
Now, you have told us when you were here before that you are a professor. You teach people at the University of Pennsylvania.
Yes, I do.
Do you teach how to conduct therapy?
Yes, I do.
Is that the main part of your teaching?
Yes, it is.
And as part of your teaching obligations, do you supervise the students who are learning to be therapists in the therapy that they are giving in the course of their... They give therapy in the course of their training, do they not?
Yes, they do.
That's the more advanced part of their training?
Yes, it is.
And do you evaluate and supervise the therapy of the students that you teach?
Yes, not only do I do that, but I also, because of being division chair, am responsible for all of the instructors and their supervision of our students.
So other instructors also supervise the students?
Yes, they do.
And what physical means do you use to You don't attend all the therapy sessions, I take it?
No.
So how do you do your evaluation of the therapy that the students are giving?
Students are required to tape record all of their therapy sessions with their patients. They then bring the tape to the supervisor. The supervisor reviews all of the tapes, and then they come in for individual supervision, so that not only the tape comes in, but also their notes, and it is gone over in a detailed manner as to the process, if you will, between the student and his patient. That's on the audio tape. We also do videotapes of sessions, and we do one-way screen mirror of students with their patients.
So you watch sometimes?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Now, with respect then to these audio tapes, I take it then that you have a fair amount of experience in analyzing therapy sessions on audio tape.
Yes.
Now, you use the word process.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. In training future therapists, are there methods that they are taught, things they're supposed to do in dealing with patients?
Yes, there are.
And what is the significance of process?
Process is an important component of the therapy. It's divided. We divide it in terms of what's content, what is said during the session, as well as what occurs from an interaction standpoint, or process, or what may be not said, what may be hinted at, what may be going on with the patient that needs to come into the therapy session.
Let me see if I understand the dichotomy. There are two things. There's content, that's what is said, what is hinted at, what seems to be coming from the patient.
That is correct.
And then there is process, which is how the therapist interacts.
Right, what is said between the two parties.
The two parties being the therapist and the patient.
Yes.
Okay. Now we're going to return to this area of your training of therapists a little bit later on in your examination today, but for now, did you analyze this purported therapy session with Dr. Oziel and the Menendez brothers, both from the standpoint of content, what is said, not said, hinted at, and the standpoint of process?
Yes, I did.
And do you have an opinion as to, I guess, whether or not this is what you would characterize as a competent or acceptable therapy session?
Objection, improper opinion, recommendation.
Overrule.
Yes, I do.
And would you tell us what that opinion is?
My opinion is this would be an unacceptable form for a therapy session.
And can you give us the reasons why you think this is an unacceptable form for a therapy session?
First, just on the tape alone, there's no introduction. There's no naming of persons. There's no consent given for the tape being made, and no necessarily any statement of why it's going to be made. Second of all, there are many missed pieces to follow up on that one would expect a therapist, to be able to follow. There are what we call missed metaphors.
If I can stop you for 1 second, I want to go back to the first point you were making as to the nature of the tape. Is it appropriate, or is it what you're training your therapist to do, to just start in the middle of a patient's sentence?
No, that's not acceptable.
Is there a commonly held theory about what are the most significant things, or what is the most significant time in a therapy session to learn what the patient's thoughts and feelings really are?
Yes, there is.
And what is that commonly held belief about the most significant time?
Commonly held belief is that within the first 5 minutes, what the patient initially brings up, and the theme, once the therapist can grasp the theme, that becomes very critical to the entire hour.
And it's the patient's theme, is that correct?
Patient's theme, yes.
Now, to return to where you were, you said there were missed pieces to follow up on. Pieces being offered by whom?
Pieces being offered by the patient.
And who was it who failed to follow up?
The therapist.
Dr. Oziel?
Dr. Oziel.
And you said there were missed metaphors.
Yes.
Now, What role does metaphor have in therapy? If you could explain to the jury.
Yeah. A metaphor generally refers to someone by name or a type of person by name, and that can be what is called a metaphor for someone else or for a theme, but it should be followed up on as soon as the therapist questions it in his or her own mind.
Okay, so a metaphor is a patient making a statement about someone or something.
Yes.
And they're making a statement that's metaphorical. They really mean something else.
That is correct.
And the therapist is supposed to pick up and find out, what do they really mean?
To explore it more, not necessarily to identify it or to interpret it, but to give one more exploration of that.
Now, is therapy some kind of search for truth?
Yes, that's one way to describe it.
And is it typical in therapy that patients just come in and sit down and tell the therapist their true psychological state?
No.
Why is that not common?
Objection, Your Honor. This has been asked and answered in previous testimony.
I believe so.
Let me answer your question.
Patients come in with a variety of kinds of issues, and the purpose is to get some clarity, to get some organization, to get the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors into a cohesive order.
Do people who are seeking therapy ordinarily understand or have insight into their problems, their behaviors?
No, that is why they are in therapy.
So in the way you train your therapists, are they bound to accept, or should they be accepting at face value, the specific words that patients say?
No.
What is the whole reason for having a therapist there?
Is to explore and to bring into awareness and to give insight, if you will, as to what their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors mean.
And are they supposed to do that by formulating their own opinions and conclusions about what happened in the patient's life and telling the patient, here's your problem, and getting the patient to agree with them?
No, the therapist is not supposed to introduce their own thoughts. They're supposed to elicit that from the patient, use the patient's own words, and to explore with the patient areas that the patient brings into the session.
Okay. Now, you have indicated that part of your criticism of this session is the missed pieces, the missed metaphors. Are there other things about it that you find below the standard of your teaching and training?
Yes.
And what else is there?
Other things that are done is that the therapist introduces his own theories, if you will, his own ideas. He suggests, he leads. He also does certain things that would be considered certainly very bad technique. It's manipulative.
I just want to say, are we at all surprised that Dr. Oziel is unethical in or at least doesn't follow the standard protocol when it comes to conducting his sessions, especially recording them? I'm not surprised that he's, not quite on the up and up when it comes to this stuff, based on everything that we've heard from him and from his mistress, Judalon Smith, and his live-in nanny/girlfriend. Oh, he's a character, isn't he?
He's manipulative?
Yes. He's controlling in the session.
Is there any particular portion of the session, without too much elaboration because the jury will hear it, where this aspect that he's manipulative and controlling and using bad technique is blatant?
Yes, it comes a little bit beyond halfway through the tape, in which he changes the whole flow of the session and requires the brothers to look at each other and to have more of a face-to-face, expressive kind of exchange.
And from your listening to the tape, do the brothers appear to want to do this?
The brothers are very clear to say they don't want it, they feel uncomfortable, they don't like it, and they protest quite a bit in that particular segment of the tape.
And does Dr. Oziel heed their protest?
No, he doesn't heed it, and he also laughs at them.
Imagine a therapist who laughs at you. Okay, these guys are kids. I mean, young adults, so they don't necessarily know any different, maybe. They don't have a lot of experience worldly or with therapists. So to have a therapist manipulate, control the conversation, especially when they've been under the thumb of the controlling Jose Menendez and Kitty Menendez. And I'm not surprised that the boys, wouldn't think that it would be abnormal that their therapist is controlling and manipulative. But it is baffling. It's baffling the amount of bravado Jerome Oziel has, that's okay to do in his sessions. And it's on video or on audio tape now, so the whole world knows how unethical and shady he is.
In spite of that, do they go along with what he wants?
Don't worry, if you don't know or aren't aware, Oziel has already lost his therapy license. He's no longer allowed to um, practice under the law.
That segment of the tape.
Yes, they do.
Now, you said that he is suggestive and he is leading during the course of this tape.
Yes.
Are there times during the course of this tape when one or both of the brothers agree with him?
Yes, there are.
And are there more times when they reject what he is suggesting?
Yes, there are.
Now, just to summarize before we play the tape, strike that. Are there other things about how this supposed session was conducted that you take issue with?
Dr. Oziel ignores the feelings of the brothers. I've said that in a different way. That's certainly bad technique.
Laughing, controlling, ignores the boys and their actual, like their needs. I can't, oh my God, this therapist. I have a feeling that Jose somehow knew that this particular therapist was a little unethical and it could help keep the narrative secret by, having this unethical therapist treating his son who was having behavioral learning issues, all sorts of issues just because of the abuse that he was enduring at home. So Jose sends him to Dr. Oziel basically to continue to further condition and groom Erik and Lyle. Well, Erik was seeing him. Lyle only came after the homicides happened to see him. But that's what I have this feeling that like Jose knew this creepy therapist was not very ethical and he could get away with sending his son there and not letting, not getting the narrative out and also potentially helping him to groom Erik or, condition him to be what he wanted at home, I mean, ew, just the thought of that is so disgusting, but I wouldn't put it past the two of them. That's all I'm saying.
Was it your opinion that Dr. Oziel just doesn't know how to be a therapist and is using bad technique?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Why was it significant to you that Ms. Smith talked about how and why, if you will, Dr. Oziel wanted to get the Menendez brothers on tape? How did that assist your evaluation of this tape?
Objection, improper opinion.
Sustained.
Why was that significant to you?
Same objection and argumentative.
Sustained.
On which grounds, Your Honor?
Same proper opinion.
Now, Dr. Burgess, you have previously testified that you were aware, both through testimony in this trial and through your interviews with Erik Menendez, that he never told Dr. Oziel the truth about why his parents were killed.
Yes.
Argumentative.
It's foundational, Your Honor.
Overruled, but let's get beyond these foundational questions.
Okay.
Part of it.
Now, does this tape basically corroborate what he told you?
Yes, it does.
Objection, improper opinion. Move to strike the answer.
Sustained, the answer stricken.
Well, is this consistent with what he told you?
Same objection. Improper opinion.
Sustained.
Well, Your Honor, that's not an opinion.
All right, it is an opinion, obviously.
Does Erik Menendez, in the course of this tape, tell Dr. Oziel that he was molested by his parents and that he killed them in self-defense?
No.
Does Lyle Menendez, during the course of this tape, tell Dr. Oziel that there were a series of arguments because of the molestation of Erik by the father and that the killing was in self-defense? Do they use those words?
No, they do not.
It's because you usually don't know how to verbally express yourself when you're in that situation. And when you're being abused, you don't always can't see it for what it is. So you don't know you're doing it in self-defense. You just know you're doing it because you're afraid.
Are there, however, metaphors used by both brothers throughout the course of this tape that were significant to you?
Objection, improper opinion.
How much more question do you have before you play the tape?
About 2 more questions, Your Honor, because I'm about to do just one example and then we're going to play the tape.
All right, let's play the tape first and then get back to this and do it that way.
Well, I would just like an answer to that question and one example, and then I'm going to play the tape so that the jury knows what to listen for.
All right. Do you understand the question?
Yes.
Okay, you may answer it.
Yes.
Are there metaphors used
Yes.
by both brothers throughout?
Yes, there are.
And this is one of the things Dr. Oziel never follows up on?
That's correct.
In the very beginning of the tape, do you have the transcript in front of you?
Yes, I do.
You said that the you indicated the tape begins in the middle of a sentence by Erik Menendez.
Yes, it does. They were both killed.
And why is that a metaphor when Erik is talking about that? How do you interpret that as a metaphor?
That is a metaphor that one would want to, as a therapist, would explore to find out what is in his mind that he's making this metaphor, that he's talking about this. Does it have any meaning to him? What else is in his mind about it? Not that one would make an interpretation, certainly at this point, but to see if that evokes some aspect of identification.
What do you mean by identification?
In terms, identification means that a person feels something, can align themselves with that other person, whether it has to do with what happened or feeling or thinking, thoughts, feelings, behaviors. All of that would be explored.
Let me see if I understand you. You would want to explore, if Erik Menendez refers to Bobby and John Kennedy, two brothers who were killed, you would want to explore whether he's identifying with them as a brother who feared being killed?
Yes, but not making that interpretation, but just to see what is in their mind, in the patient's mind about that, why he brings that up. And that would be a theme that also should be followed throughout. It's within the first 2 minutes of the tape.
So if you had a therapist under your training where a patient said this, and particularly if you knew that patient had made statements of being afraid of being killed, you would have followed up?
Yes.
Dr. Conte, you testified in this courtroom some time ago with regard to your analysis of Joseph Lyle Menendez, who's seated here in front of you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the connection of his lifetime experiences and the killing of his parents on August 20th.
Why did that not play the tape? Do we have to go back and play the tape? What the heck? Hold on one second. I'm not sure why they didn't play the tape right there after Burgess, because this is all edited by somebody else, so I apologize. But they are going to play parts of the tape after some testimony from Dr. John Conte. So let's listen to this. Sorry. It's coming. The tape is coming, I swear.
Here in front of you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the connection of his lifetime experiences and the killing of his parents on August 20th, 1989. Is that correct? Since you were here to testify, have you had the opportunity to review some additional materials?
Yes.
And the additional material in particular was a tape recording of a session on December 11th, 1989 with Dr. Oziel, Erik Menendez, and Lyle Menendez. Is that correct?
Yes.
And does that tape recording contain the voices of all three of these individuals discussing the facts surrounding the killing of the parents?
Yes.
And in this tape recorded document, are there actually facts about the killing itself or more motivation, family constellation type material?
Objection, proper opinion.
Overruled to answer the question. I'd say there tends to be more information about the family constellation.
Okay. So this is not a tape about how many shots were fired or what type of ammunition was used or that type of thing?
That's correct.
And did you review that tape to determine whether it affected your opinion in this case?
Yes.
And the opinion you previously testified to was that you believed the motivation for the killings was fear. Is that correct?
Yes.
And having reviewed that tape recording, do you still hold the same opinion or do you have a different opinion?
I hold the same opinion about the fear.
And has anything about your opinion changed by virtue of having listened to that tape recording?
Yes.
And what changes, if any?
Well, I think that this tape recording is an indication of what transpired between the Menendez brothers and Dr. Oziel suggests or raises greater concern about Dr. Oziel's technique and purpose in relating to the Menendez brothers.
Your Honor, move to strike the answer as being a proper opinion on the part of the witness.
Overruled, the answer will stand.
And what do you mean with regard to technique?
Well, this is, my understanding is that this was supposed to be a therapeutic relationship in which Dr. Oziel was the therapist for both of these.
But after reviewing the tape, it doesn't seem like he's a therapist. We all know how he was on the stand. He's going to be controlling, combative, everything he was on the stand. He's going to be that same way with boys, but worse because he's shaping their minds after a traumatic event.
Boys, and it's possible in analyzing a transcript of the session to get some idea of how a professional approaches that task. And in analyzing how this session was conducted, I think it illustrates a number of concerns that I'd had some awareness about before, but became more clear in looking at this tape.
What specific concerns are you talking about?
Well, to answer that, I have to sort of explain for just a minute what therapy is, because it's what lots of people think therapy is based on Bob Newhart or movies or what have you. It's not really what therapy is all about. So to understand this tape, you have to understand something about therapy. There are different schools or models of therapy. Some models suggest that you teach clients new behaviors so they can act in different ways, and some schools teach people to, or help people gain insight into how past experiences influence present functioning. But across the models of therapy, there's more in common than there is in separate. And what is essentially at the core of all therapeutic approaches is a special relationship, a relationship which is designed to meet the needs of the client. And so there are what we call ground rules or boundaries, or there are ideas, principles about how you proceed. Confidentiality is one such, but there are other examples. And all of those rules are designed to make it possible for the client to trust the helper, the therapist, and be able to tell the therapist any thought or feeling or impulse or any idea and not feel that they're going to be rejected or judged, but rather accept it. And so it's the responsibility of the therapist to create an environment in which therapy can take place, in which there's an understanding about the ground rules, and in fact in which the ground rules are implemented.
And how do you find that that was not carried out? What is reflected in this tape that suggests that that was not carried out?
Well, I think there are a number of boundary violations. One of them, I think, for example, is there is a universal prohibition in all therapeutic models about dual relationships. You don't become your client or your patient.
This is a problem with Dr. Oziel, having dual relationships with clients. This is a repeated problem. He lost his license for doing something similar, having a patient who couldn't afford sessions come and do housework on his house, and I think live with him at the time too. So like doing handy jobs and like handy work around the house, like here and there. That was his payment to Dr. Oziel, which is completely unethical. Oziel's receiving something from the relationship, so it's completely unethical for him to do. He also was accused of having relations with some of his clients. So, as you can see, Dr. Oziel is a great human being.
Lover or friend or business partner. And the reason for that is the therapist has greater power, so it can't be an equal relationship. And if the client has the idea that the therapist may engage in these other activities, then they will no longer be a safe communicator to share information or to explore inner things about themselves.
Let me stop you. Is what you're suggesting is that if someone is going to end up in another relationship, in addition to the therapeutic one, that is a business or friendship or love relationship, they'll want to be an equal in that relationship? And so if in therapy they reveal secrets about themselves, they'll be more vulnerable?
Yes, but it's more than that. The argument is that because of the therapist's lack of emotional involvement and because they are in a more powerful position, it is forever impossible to make a more balanced relationship, such as the kind of relationship you want between business partners, where both people were equally able to protect their own individual best interests. And so most professional societies forbid forever, not just when therapy ends, but forbid forever a therapist ever going into a dual relationship, such as business or a personal relationship, friendship or love relationship, because the feeling is that the relationship started out unequal and it can never become equal, and therefore is always the opportunity or the danger that the therapist will use his superior knowledge or his advantage for his own rather than the client's own interest.
Now, you're aware of testimony here in this trial by Lyle Menendez and Erik Menendez and their uncle Carlos that Dr. Oziel had interjected himself into their possible financial future. Is that correct?
Yes.
He'd involved himself in helping them select a probate lawyer. He had suggested that he would help them invest in future businesses if they should ever get any inheritance, that type of information. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that one of the areas that you're expressing concern about, is the fact that he had established already that he would be a business partner of theirs in the future?
That's one of the areas in which he appears to have broken a fundamental principle of therapy, and therefore to understand the tape, one has to understand that there is a real possibility that this is in fact not a therapeutic relationship, because a critical tenet of therapy has been violated.
You also have information, I believe, in terms of the fact that the last time that Lyle Menendez saw Dr. Oziel the last session that he had with him prior to this session was November the 2nd. Is that correct?
Yes.
And from November the 2nd to December 11th, there are no notes, no indication that there was any sort of therapeutic session going on.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
You also have information that this session was conducted because Dr. Oziel had indicated that he wanted the contact
Yes.
with Lyle and Erik Menendez, rather than them seeking him out for therapy. Is that correct?
Objection calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Does it affect your opinion as to the validity of the session itself in terms of whether it is initiated by the patient or it is initiated by the therapist?
Well, to some extent. It's not just the initiation that's so important. I mean, it is conceivable for a competent therapist who hasn't seen a client for a while to initiate contact because of some concern. But if the initiation isn't for concern about the patient, but is rather concern for the therapist, emotion or financial gain or whatever it would be, then that would be another, although relatively small, example of a concern that I would have about the nature of the therapeutic relationship.
Now, in this tape-recorded document, there is no reference by Lyle Menendez or Erik Menendez to having been physically, psychologically, or sexually abused. Is that correct?
Correct.
And does that concern you in any way with regard to the opinions you've rendered?
Well, it's a complex issue, but it doesn't concern me.
Why?
Well, there are a number of reasons. First of all, is the sort of principle of child abuse that many victims of child abuse are in therapy for years and years and never reveal. Revealing abuse requires a level of comfort. We suspect that one of the reasons that people reveal abuse in therapy is when the therapist asks them about past experiences. And if therapists don't ask, many times victims won't tell, and there are complex reasons for that. especially where there is a improper or improper therapeutic situation. It's not at all surprising that people would not reveal things which are particularly anxiety-producing or traumatic. And I think everything I've learned about this relationship suggests that it was not a good therapeutic one, and therefore it's not surprising that Lyle would not reveal to this individual critical things about his past and about his experience.
In your experience in working with Lyle Menendez,
Because remember, this is the first time Lyle, the first or second time, I think it's the first, that he's ever even meeting Oziel. So Dr. Oziel calls this meeting out of the blue and has them come in. And obviously they're already probably suspicious because the doctor made the appointment. Lyle doesn't want to talk about this, and it wasn't his idea to go in there. So yeah, I mean, that's problematic, I think.
did you find that that he was able to give you all of the information he had all at once, or that you gradually would get more and more information?
I think my experience with Lyle is consistent with my experience with other survivors, which is they reveal in very small doses. They reveal a little bit at a time. That's partly to protect themselves. It's partly to protect the person who's listening. It's partly to see if what they reveal is going to have any negative impact on them. So that what is sometimes called a rolling disclosure or a gradual disclosure over time is the norm rather than the exception in abuse.
And in Lyle Menendez's case, he first was able to discuss his abuse by his mother and then considerably later his abuse by his father. Is that
Yes.
correct? And is that also consistent with your experience?
Well, it's consistent with my experience. It's also consistent with my understanding that it was, for him, the abuse by the father, which was far more conflictual or far more anxiety-producing or traumatic or painful. So he revealed that much later.
When you listened to the tape of December the 11th, did you find it to be consistent with what Lyle Menendez had testified to he had already agreed to in the November 2nd session?
Your Honor, objection is improper opinion.
Sustained.
In listening to the tape recording of December the 11th, were you listening to see if new material was disclosed?
Well, I was listening for a number of things. I was listening to see if there was new information or information that would alter something that I understood. I was listening for what the interaction would tell me about the nature of the relationship between Dr. Oziel and his two clients. I was listening for any information that it would give me about the events that I had previously assessed or the emotional state of the person that I had evaluated, because this was potentially a sample of behavior from long before I'd actually met.
You said one of the areas that you analyzed was the material. Is that correct? And what conclusions did you form based on that evaluation?
Well, I may have used to a clinical term by material. Material is, when we use it in therapy, we're talking not only about the facts of what was said and whether it's consistent, but also how it is said and what it tells us about the individual psychologically. And so I was listening both for facts that I'd been told or read to see if they were new or different or challenged. And I was also listening for the emotional content or material, especially from Lyle, but to some extent from Erik and Dr. Oziel also.
And what, with regard to the facts, was significant to you about this tape?
Well, I think there are a number of things. There is some information which is not consistent with other information I had obtained. So there's some things here which are inconsistent with my understanding about various personalities. I think it also was significant to me that there were things in Dr. Oziel's understanding or theory of what happened that weren't even present here. And that was surprising to me.
What do you mean by that? Things that were in Dr. Oziel's understanding that weren't present there?
Objection, improper opinion.
Well, again, it's hard to answer because I filter it through the whole context of my understanding of what's going on. But there was no discussion of perfect crime, for example. There was testimony that Dr. Oziel had given that at least my reading of it, I didn't actually see his testimony, but my reading of the testimony was that one of the motives was to create a perfect crime, and there was no mention anywhere in this material of a perfect crime.
How many times did he say on the stand it was all about the perfect crime, the perfect homicide? But yet it wasn't even discussed in this tape. Where's Oziel getting that? I think that's his phraseology so that he could make himself famous.
And that was surprising since I thought that was part of what Dr. Oziel said was happening.
Dr. Oziel also, with regard to perfect crime, did you read Lyle Menendez's testimony with regard to... Lyle Menendez was asked about Dr. Oziel's testimony. Dr. Oziel had said that they talked about a perfect crime. Lyle Menendez, in his testimony, indicated that had never been part of the discussion. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Dr. Oziel talked about killing the father for hatred, and Lyle Menendez in his assessment indicated that had never been part of the discussion. Does that theme appear anywhere in the tape, that there's hatred?
No. There is mention to hate, but there's not hatred of father as a motive for the parents' death.
So hatred or anger did not seem to be the motive.
The tape does not contain a discussion of self-defense. Is that correct?
Correct.
It does have an explanation for how the killings occurred, or why the killings occurred.
It has an explanation, yes.
Okay. And did you evaluate that explanation?
Yes.
And is there any significance with regard to any opinion you formed with regard to that explanation?
Well, I thought the essential theory, it's hard to justify this by calling it a theory, but the essential idea that, for example, mom was killed out of mercy, I thought to be psychologically naive and not to be consistent with anything that I had read or heard anywhere else.
Okay. And yet that was the theory that was suggested by Dr. Oziel and adopted by the brothers in the November 2nd session.
Objection, argumentative, and improper opinion.
Are you aware that both Lyle and Erik Menendez indicated that this was an idea suggested by Dr. Oziel and that they agreed to?
When you say as you were,
Have you read the testimony of Lyle and Erik Menendez, in which they indicate that this was the idea that mother was killed because she was suicidal and this was an act of mercy? That they had agreed with that idea November the 2nd.
Objection, argumentative.
When you listened to this tape, you indicated that one of the theories expressed is this mercy killing, more or less. Is that consistent with what you had already heard had been a theory suggested previously?
Objection, improper opinion.
What other material or factual material was important to you in forming your opinion?
In terms of,
Evaluating this tape and whether it had any impact on your prior evaluation.
well, again, there was prior, I believe in Dr. Oziel's testimony, there was discussion that it was done for the money. There's nothing in this tape about doing it for the money. In fact, there's reference to being disinherited. There are other issues about the tape, I think. I mean, there are places, for example, where one or other of the boys says two things in a segment that are inconsistent with each other, so it's difficult to follow. There are many places in the tape where words would appear to have double meaning, and it's not always possible to tell what exactly is being said. Now, that's quite common sometimes with people who are in an anxious situation, is that they'll say things that can be taken double meaning, taken as one of two ways, and it's the job of the therapist to clarify it. I can't find any place in here where the therapist tried to clarify those issues where meaning was not clear.
Do you find that the content of this tape is inconsistent in terms of the theories, the explanations that Lyle and Erik are giving for why the killings occurred?
Objection, improper opinion.
the question is vague as to what you mean.
Your understanding, according to your prior testimony, was that these killings took place because of an aroused state of fear on the part of Lyle and Erik Menendez, and that they killed because they believed their lives were in danger. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does this tape reflect that fact pattern?
No.
Does this tape reflect a different fact pattern?
Yes.
And what is the fact pattern? What is the impact on your opinion of the fact that this tape contains a different scenario?
Well, again, given the context, which is the nature of the relationship between the person making the tape and these two young men, given that this tape apparently represents a discussion taking place in early November 2nd, I think, and that this is kind of a replaying of portions of that, and given the problems in the tape, given the number of problems in the material itself, such as the inconsistency and those things, it doesn't alter my understanding about what happened.
When you say that this is based on the November 2nd discussion, I mean the meeting that Lyle and Erik have with Dr. Oziel November 2nd, in which the theories are developed, it is those theories that are then recorded on this tape?
Objection calls for speculation, lack of foundation.
Sustained.
Does it appear that after the November 2nd session that Dr. Oziel was left with the impression that this was a killing that was planned to put mother out of her misery and to punish father for having made her miserable?
Objection calls for speculation and proper opinion.
Sustained.
Well, that's just foundational, if I may.
Objection sustained.
Does the content of the tape, in terms of the theory that it proposes, make sense to you?
Objection, improper opinion.
You have to rephrase the question. Objection sustained.
Does the material in the tape offer you an explanation which seems more logical than the explanation that was given to you as a result of interviewing Lyle and Erik Menendez and other witnesses?
Objection, improper opinion.
Sustained to the form of the question.
Your opinion is that this homicide was committed out of fear.
Yes.
Is there anything in that tape that seems to be a more logical theory, more logical explanation that would make you doubt whether this was committed out of fear?
Objection, improper opinion.
Overruled.
No, but it's not just a matter of logic. It's a matter of what I understand about child abuse and about human behavior.
Okay, let's start with logically. Did you evaluate it on that basis,
Yes.
in terms of whether this made sense?
Yes.
And what was your evaluation?
Well, again, there are areas where the statements and the tape are internally inconsistent. Something is said and the opposite is said within a few seconds in a conversation. There are several references to the prior discussion, which I believe to be November 2nd, in which there's a reference to something that took place. It's not part of this tape, it's some conversation or some theory between Dr. Oziel and Lyle. There's just a host of reasons to question the context in which this is made and this itself, and the theories that are actually offered I don't think to be particularly psychologically sound.
Why?
Well, first of all, because I don't find any evidence other than Dr. Oziel suggesting to the boys that there was a mercy element in this. Dr. Oziel, even in this tape, is sort of puzzled and doesn't understand why Dad. So here is supposed to be a tape that sort of embodies a summary or an understanding of why this took place, and the person primarily responsible for making it still doesn't seem to understand it within here.
Move to strike with Dr. Oziel's understanding of speculation on the part of the witness. Your Honor.
Sustained. That portion of the answer is stricken.
Does this tape seem to still be a searching for explanations?
Objection, proper opinion.
Sustained.
When you reviewed the material, did you look at it in context of other information that you had about the family?
Yes.
And when the suggestion is made that Mom is killed now because she is so miserable and so suicidal, did you consider the fact that her mental condition had been far worse in '86 and in '87
Yes.
than it was now?
Yeah, in fact, things had improved.
And did you consider the fact that the letters that are referred to, the suicide letters and the letter from Lyle asking her to leave the father, had occurred at least 2 years prior to the killing of the parents?
Yes.
And did that affect your opinion as to whether killing Mother because she was suicidal made any sense?
Yes, it seemed to be a theory that was based either on old information or on information that is not consistent with other knowledge I had about the family.
And there are sections of the tape in which there are emotions described by the parents that are inconsistent with other information you had. Is that correct? Is there particularly a paragraph that talks about when which Lyle Menendez is talking about seeing his father cry?
Yes.
And in that same paragraph, does he talk about his father never cried?
Yes.
And
That's
this-
one of the examples.
Examples of what? What's the
Well, it's
impact?
an inconsistency within a few seconds. He's describing his father crying. Nothing I've ever heard from anyone in this case suggests that Mr. Menendez was the person who was giving to showing any emotion other than perhaps rage, and certainly not an emotion that would be perceived as weakness, as crying was in that family. And so there's a description of several places where he cried, and then it's 6 or 7 lines later, so it's a few seconds of conversation later, Lyle takes it back and basically says, I cried, I never saw him cry, or something to that effect.
What's your analysis of that? To say, I saw him cry, and then to say he didn't cry. What's that mean to you about the content of the tape?
Well, again, it makes me question how much faith they have in the tape at all. It appears to be a script, but in spite of the script,
Your Honor, move to strike what appears to be a script as a conclusion on the part of the witness and improper opinion.
Objection sustained. That portion of the answer is stricken.
Okay. It appears to be something that is artificial.
artificial, it was arranged previously, there are references.
Your Honor, move to strike artificial and previous arrangement as being speculation on the part of the witness, lack of foundation.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
Are there references by Lyle Menendez in talking to Dr. Oziel where he says things like you said before, or as you mentioned before? Is that what you're referring to specifically?
Yes.
And what effect does that have on your evaluation of the accuracy of the content of the material?
Objection, improper opinion.
Sustained.
Does that have any effect?
Yes.
Objection, improper opinion, improper area of inquiry.
Proper what?
Area of inquiry of this witness.
Overall.
Does that have any effect on your opinion as to the accuracy of the information? If it seems to, and what is that?
Objection, improper opinion.
Overall.
Well, again, I think it indicates that this is a set of ideas which have been discussed previously and which are being repeated here for the purposes of the audio tape.
And in that paragraph in which there's the discussion about Dad crying, there's a reference to something called the Calabasas incident.
Yes.
And what do you believe that to refer to?
I believe that refers to some burglaries that took place in Calabasas.
And what is your information with regard to Lyle Menendez's involvement?
My understanding is that his brother had been involved in, I think one, but I'm not absolutely sure, one burglary that, it's been a while since I thought about this, but and Erik showed Lyle some of the stuff that had been taken. Lyle, for a number of reasons, went along, was involved in another burglary. I think it was kids kind of burglarizing or whatever the proper word is, each other's homes.
You mean they knew the victims?
Yeah.
When you say kids, I mean it's that they knew.
Objection,
They weren't
meeting.
12 years old. I mean they.
I'm sorry, young man, right?
But so they knew the victim.
Yes. What else?
And did you take that into consideration in forming your opinions in this case?
Yes.
And in the tape, you said that it was significant to you that there were references to other sources of the material, that is, the like you said or as you mentioned kind of thing. Were there other incidents in the tape that were of significance to you because they seem to be revealing more what you believe to be what really happened in terms of this being something where there wasn't any choice or that it was spontaneous? Are there statements in the tape of that nature?
There are places primarily where there is sort of double meaning or the meaning is not clear, and it could be referring to what I understood to be the events, or it could not. It was hard to tell because it wasn't followed up by Dr. Oziel.
So when you say not followed up, such as when Erik says something about I didn't have any choice, Dr. Oziel never says, what do you mean you didn't have any choice?
That's one example. I think there are a number.
Was that of any significance to you?
Well, again, yes, it goes to the confidence they have in the tape because important things are not followed up.
Was there anything in this tape that was, strike that if I may. Before you testified here in court, you reviewed Lyle Menendez's testimony about the November 2nd session with Dr. Oziel. Is that correct?
Yes.
And he indicated in court that when he walked out of Dr. Oziel's office on November 2nd, he had signed on to a planned killing of his parents, his mother because she was suicidal, and his father because he was controlling. Is that correct?
Essentially.
And you knew that before you came and testified before?
Yes.
And he indicated in his testimony he had agreed to those ideas because Dr. Oziel had suggested him and he didn't want to tell what really happened. Is that correct?
Correct.
After listening to the tape, do you find that there's anything added to that in any way changes your opinion?
No.
So, Your Honor, at this time I propose to play tape recording, and may Dr. Bridges step down for 48 minutes.
Certainly.
And we would stipulate that the court reporter need not transcribe tape.
All right. And there are transcripts of this tape that will be distributed to the jurors. As I've said in reference to other transcripts of tape recordings, these are only given to the jurors to assist you in following the words on the tape. The fact that you have these transcripts is just to assist you in listening to the tape recording. The conversation was tape recorded, and the recording is the evidence of the conversation, and the transcripts sometimes have errors in them. Although these transcripts appear to be pretty accurate, there are occasions when words are missed or omitted or misstated, and you are the judge of what actually is said on the tape, and these are only to assist you in listening to the tape, but your ears are the final judge of what is actually on the tape, hearing it yourselves. Just use these to follow along.
I believe people would stipulate that before the close of the case, if we can refine the transcripts and make them any more accurate, we will do so, and what would ultimately be admitted into evidence would be the best version that we can come up with.
Okay. Well, I'm sure the lawyers will keep working at it, but no matter how hard they work, it's my experience that no matter what effort goes into a transcript, there's always something wrong with them. There's always some words misplaced or whatever, and it's no one's fault, just the way these transcripts are prepared, and it's only so much time and effort can be done to prepare them. That's why we caution you to listen to the tape as the evidence of the conversation.
Okay, Your Honor, I have this turned up as high as it can go, but as the court knows, it's not
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay.
We didn't know it. My father would be there, and which we learned that the Kennedy president. His father told him that he wanted Bob in his position. Not what John said. And we thought there was a senator, or whether we made hundreds of millions of dollars, it would all be because my father was this incredible man. They were just two brothers. There's a question about that. The other sense I felt, or I had, is that we felt totally trapped. I really think that just, there wasn't really a family. And when you're talking about a family, so we're talking about what's wrong with your family, but in a sense what's really wrong with your family is there wasn't a family. I mean, there was no communication. There was no closeness, there was no bonding in your family. And the only people who had a bond really in your family, really, were the two of you. I mean, you couldn't really bond, either of you, with your mom because of what happened with your mother in terms of all of the separation. She didn't communicate openly and honestly with you and didn't trust you ultimately. And you
Is it just Oziel talking in this tape? Like, what the hell? He's just telling them how it was. It's- I don't know if you know this, Dr. Oziel. You're supposed to let the patients talk.
couldn't communicate with her and trust that she wouldn't tell your dad and trust that she wouldn't go to your dad. Your dad was like the enforcer, and your father didn't communicate honestly with your mother, and your mother was terrified of your father and would not communicate honestly with your father. The only people that were left to have a bond were the two of you. And throughout the time that
he found the first suicide note, that created a huge bond there. He called me and so on and so forth. And then I immediately wrote my mother.
Yeah, I remember that. I found the suicide note and I started crying. I could not read it from below the phone, I just started crying.
Where did you find it?
I found it in her drawer. I don't remember what I was looking for.
Under a book.
Under a book.
What did it say?
And it said that she was going to. It said that she was going to kill herself, and that.
No, what it said is, I'm sorry I had to do this. I love you both, Lyle and Erik. I love your father. I just can't seem to deal with my own problems anymore. I want you to go ahead and have the life I thought I wanted for you and all the things I told you. And I'm really sorry it had to happen this way, but I have to do this. And blah, 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 blah. And at first, he thought it was just that my mother was leaving my father. And it was not until I told him that, don't get excited, but there's a strong possibility that what she's talking about is she's going to kill herself, that he became hysterical. Because at first he thought, well, Mom, just leave the dad and we'll prevent that. And now it was any day.
Exactly. And
so,
it was also the fact that
at that point I was living alone in New Jersey in a mansion that they had left, and that was a tough time. But then I immediately approached my mother, and this is really aggravating. Well, because I was alone, and there wasn't.
Well, I think that the reason.
It's a tough time because it was so far away from what people thought that you couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't tell my aunt. What are we going to do about my mother's suicide thing? I mean, you couldn't do anything like that, and it was just
The reason why she didn't, I in fact believe at that time, was because she couldn't. She couldn't kill herself. I mean, you could take a gun and you could put it behind you, and you could pull the trigger. It takes an amazing amount of energy, and she was so drained from learning about the affair, which was right after she learned about the affair, because I was listening in the next room, and for months and months and months, I would have to listen to my mother crying in the house. I would come home, my mother would be crying upstairs, and I would just be watching TV downstairs, and I would just hear the sobbing, and I couldn't go up and say what was wrong. And I would, because I didn't have that kind of relationship, but I just never, I wish I had, and I look back on it now, and I wish I had that kind of relationship. But
That's because they didn't show affection and love towards Erik and Lyle. So for them to not know how to react to their mom in that situation, obviously they're the kids. They, the parents are supposed to be in control of their emotions, and not that, we all don't have times where we're out of control, but usually the parents keep it together for the kids. So it's kind of like playing a different side of it. Like the boys have to be the parent almost in that situation because Kitty is so disassociated with what's going on.
I remember when we first moved out and we were living in the condominium, I would hear right through the wall and I would listen about how they were about to have a divorce, and how my dad was telling my mom that they should not have a divorce. And I was just, that year, we were just going right through it. And from listening to her, she wasn't strong enough. What year was that? It was the year we first moved out. That was just a few years ago. Yeah, it was 1987.
Well, when you ended up killing your mom, did you feel like you were sparing her? I know she was horribly depressed, and she was totally dominated by your dad. She was like a shell of the person. She had no identity or strength left anymore. You had been, I know that you had been responding to her as I think almost like a person has become sort of pitiful. Yeah, that's a strong word, but is that how you felt?
Well, we were doing almost in my mom's case something that first of all, there was no way, never, could she live without my father.
That was something that we had to really, it was a big thing holding us back from killing my father, is that we thought that we would just kill Dad and eliminate the problem. And See, the first step, when I found out the first suicide note, and then it got worse and worse, but was it okay, I'll now support my mother. Erik and I decided we would rally behind my mother instead of my father, who could take care of himself, he would understand, he would probably want us to.
This is probably a big deal for Lyle because he didn't have a relationship with his mother other than at this point in time, all she was doing was yelling at him and telling him what a disappointment he was and how she wishes she never had him and all these horrible things that a parent should never tell their kids. That was the relationship that they had at this time. So that's a big deal that he's like, well, we'll rally behind mom because he's the golden boy of Jose. So he might lose favor now of Jose too. So that's another huge shift in the dynamic here that they're realizing something's got to change.
To rally again for my mother, because all along his view was you protect your mother, she's your mother, you only have one mother, I may be your father, but your father is not as close to you as your mother. And that was his view. And even though I was never as close to my mother as Erik in the early years, and I sort of rallied behind my dad because we had more in common and so on. But so I decided, okay, I'm going to rally behind my mother. And I had a conversation with her, and I wrote her a long letter saying if she ever wanted to leave Dad and whatever, she could move to Princeton, I'd live with her, she wouldn't be alone, there'd be no problems, there wouldn't be any big fight over custody of the children, we'd go with her if she wanted, and just back and forth.
I'm sorry, this is really hitting me hard. This woman treated him like crap. And here he is saying, if you ever want to leave Dad, come live with me. Come stay with me. I'll take care of you. You don't need to be with that asshole. It is like so heartwarming, but also heartbreaking at the same time. It's so heartwarming that this child who has been so damaged already by his parents, both of them, but sees the damage that is now being caused to his mother, and he's putting his own feelings aside and saying, Mom, come live with me, even though we don't get along. It's just like, sorry, this is just really hitting me that he would do that. That's heartwarming. It's heartbreaking that it had to come to this even in the first place, and that your 20-something-year-old child is telling you, leave Dad and come stay with us or stay with me in Princeton.
Whatever she wanted. And that didn't work because she cut me short immediately. There was no discussion. It was, Lyle, you're fabricating this. I started out by not wanting to really deal with her problems. I didn't want to know I found the note. It wouldn't be as effective. So I started to go through all the things that aggravated me about Dad and how he was suppressing myself and all these things. And she kept saying, no, she wouldn't even let me do that.
So this, again, broken human being is coming to his mother and saying I'm sure it is completely he's completely vulnerable at this point, telling his mother the things that his dad did to him, the way his dad treats him, the way his dad treats Erik, whatever. And Mom says, I don't want to hear it. Your dad's wonderful. And you can't go there. Don't talk to me about the horrible things that your father did to you because I can't handle it, is basically what she just did. She's like, your feelings don't matter because mine are more important. I can't handle it. So you can suffer, child of mine.
This is something you're fabricating. You know that really you bring up a lot of this upon yourself, Lyle. You don't realize this, and you don't realize that. And it was just not true. She was the worst psychologist ever. She was not, in my opinion, a good open mother like she wanted to be. I felt that at that point she was so tainted by the fact that things were so horrible between her and Dad that she couldn't come out and say, you're right, I'm having the same problems with my husband that you're having with your father, and maybe we should talk about it, like a mother should. Even just out of curiosity of wanting to discuss something. She would rather discuss my girlfriends than my relationship with my father. Mm-hmm. And she was definitely...
So So she would rather tell him not to date the girls that he was dating instead of talking about the important issues in the family.
With Dan on that issue, and so it was a dead issue within 5 minutes. I don't want to talk about it. Nope, you're wrong. You're overreacting. If you want to leave the family and you want to go off on your own, fine.
You had no one to really talk with about it, except Erik.
Except Erik, and I sort of just said, all right, fine. She doesn't want to get divorced. Things seemed to almost get better, and then all of a sudden they just turned for the worse, and I think they turned for the worse after she found out that she had made a decision that she couldn't take it anymore, and that Dad didn't love her anymore. And
Is that the affair?
I believe it was after she found out about one of the affairs, like the main affair, that it had been 8 years long or whatever, or maybe after she found out there had been more than one. It was some point where she just decided, boom.
More than one affair. One was 8 years long. Did he go to the school of Dr. Oziel mistresses? At least he never brought them home to live there. Oh my God, could you imagine? Oh, poor Kitty would have really flipped the hell out.
No way did he ever love me.
And I don't really mean poor Kitty. I don't feel a whole lot of sympathy for her. I feel sympathy for her in just the fact that she's in a sad situation. But other than that, I think that she contributed to a lot of the abuse and trauma for her own children. Anyways, sorry. Here we go.
I was wrong thinking that he loved me and he was just doing this because he needed to. And at this point, I had stopped trying to help her divorce, so she didn't have my support anymore. I was, gradually being separated from her because she was no longer someone I could talk to about anything. Anything I talked to her about, I would talk to your father.
Did she actually get angry for bringing up stuff that was negative?
She was very cold. My mother was always very good in stressful situations. Very calm. This was obviously something that was an extreme stress for her. If Erik could have walked in the room when she was crying, or when I did frequently, she would stop crying. I don't want to talk about it. It's my own problem. Blah, blah, blah.
She wouldn't let you in though.
No, very matter of fact also about stressful things, which would mean if I started saying, which I would do would be to try to get her emotional and get her emotions out. Hey, I'm with you. I think we should leave Dad. He's crazy. He's doing this and this to you. It's obvious. He's doing this to me. Her reaction is, no, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I think you're overreacting, Lyle. Here's all the things that Lyle, he bought you this car. He wanted you to do this. He wanted you to do that. He's a loving father. I don't know what you're talking about.
That is a victim mentality to talk up the perpetrator because, I mean, the boys did it too. They looked up to their dad. They admired him. They wanted to be more like, things about him they wanted to be like, I should say, because he portrayed himself as this perfect person, this wonderful success story, everything. But obviously we know that the situation at home was not picture perfect.
I think we should stop talking about it.
How angry was that?
And what?
How angry was that?
To me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was extremely angering to me because she was putting me in a position to defend the things that my father was doing to me, and that wasn't even supposed to be the issue. It was the things that I had to get past first, the things he was doing to me, to get to the things he was doing to her, and there was just no way.
You couldn't even get her to acknowledge that he was doing anything to her or to you. I mean, she wouldn't even, you were trying to protect her, and you were trying to say, Mom, we know what he's doing, and you were trying to tell her that he was doing the same thing to you and to her and to Erik, and she wouldn't acknowledge he was doing any of it and turned it around and actually blamed you as if you were an ingrate.
Right.
And she basically invalidated all of your perceptions and everything that you knew that was going on. She told you wasn't happening, got angry at you, blamed you, turned on you, and you ended up trying to protect her and getting punished and rejected, and as a person and getting told you were a bad guy, when really what you were trying to do is save her from what your dad was doing to you and your mom. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
That's it. And I didn't try as much as I wished I would have tried. I didn't know a lot of it. I found out a lot of it later on. I found out more and more and more. And in my opinion, she got worse and worse and worse. And but for a while, I was traveling so much, I was away from the picture. I'd only hear about it from Erik. Oh, my mom freaked out about this. Oh, Mom burst out crying about this. And mentioned Louisa again. And couldn't trust Dad here or there. And my reaction is, I don't want to be involved. It's a situation I can't help. And the alcohol, the drugs she would bring up to me, it was a sign that it was getting worse. And she would finally come to me and go, "You don't understand how much stress I'm under. I take 13 pills a day. I drink. Be careful about this Princeton issue or whatever. I'm not handling it well. I don't want to hear about this or that." And but there was no way I could open up to her about the real issues. I knew that she was seeking help, and I was hoping that it was help. From my girlfriend reading the letters that I found afterwards and then before, her conclusion, and it seems to be a lot of my relatives' conclusion, is that my mother could possibly have staged the whole thing and killed both of them herself, because she was unable to kill herself. And so she had someone, she just said, "Okay, kill us at some point." And that's their feeling. I mean, obviously, it's my feeling, I know it happened, but I could see how they would believe that, reading those letters. I kept thinking it over, almost as if it was true, almost as if I was like an instrument of hers in killing herself. That's where we sort of feel like, you mentioned before, that we were doing her and us a favor in putting her out of her misery, really, in that she could kill herself at any moment. And our reaction was, we knew that if she killed herself, my father was in trouble. He would physically not be able to handle that, because she was really a helpless victim. And I saw her going through her own.
I had in my mind that I would be the turning point. If my mother kills herself, I would hate my father for life, and there'd be almost no point back.
And I didn't know how my mother could live with it, and I tried not to think about it. Thinking about it was a very painful thing. That's why I don't have dreams about it now, and I don't think about it now. It's a serious sore spot, my mother, and that whole issue, because, even if I think about it for a moment, I say to myself, Dad was having an affair the whole time. He was saying he was out late working, and she was at home bearing the fact that she couldn't be with her husband, they couldn't go to the dinner parties and so on, to take care of his kids and do all the things he wanted her to do, and she worked like a dog doing that, thinking she was helping their relationship for a better time. And then he would come home and say he's tired from working late and therefore didn't want to go to dinner parties, and she would cry about that, but her strength came from the fact that he was doing it for the family and for her, and so she was going to sacrifice. And then she realized that the 20 years of sacrifice was for nothing. He was going around with other women and so on, and that her whole basis for being able to go through it all was really a falsehood. And that I could see how, boom, you want to kill yourself. Can't handle it. My whole life was a waste. I've wasted all these years. I could have been something. And our feeling, she would tell us about all the things she could have been and done and couldn't. Because she told us, Dad gave me an ultimatum. Take care of the kids and stay home and forget the acting and the hostess job that you were offered and all this other stuff, or I leave. And that was my dad's general feeling when she was crying, which was, hey, I want my life the way I want it. If I have to do things I don't want to do to satisfy the marriage, that's not the way I want to live. We'll go our separate ways. And my feeling was very strong. It's not the way it is. I told him flat out, you make sacrifices in order to have a relationship. You make compromises. It's the whole point of a relationship. You're each not going to get exactly what you want, so you try to come to, you go to a dinner party even if you don't want to, because he hasn't been able to go to one and because you've been working with. It was not his feeling at all that he should do that.
How did he respond?
He responded by saying, well, I'm not prepared to do that. My feeling is that you have a relationship, one person controls the show. If I have to do things I don't want to do, even the smallest things, then I don't want to be a part of the relationship.
So it was his way or no way?
It's his way or no way. And he did that, and he was smoking a cigarette, and I remember the scene very well back in Pennington. And I was shocked by the statement, because I realized there if I pursued it, it could lead to a divorce. I pursued it, his feeling was he would rather have a divorce than work out even a small thing like a dinner party. To me, it was amazing.
He had to have total control, or he wanted a divorce.
Right.
And is that
And he
what
he thought that it worked best that way. But that's what kept the relationship going, was that one person knew that this person was in control, or it was over.
Do you think he believed that, or do you think he needed to have that total control, and so you sort of justified it with those kind of statements? How much did you feel that you were killing your dad because of what he was doing to you each, and how much did you feel you were killing your dad in part because of what he did to your mom, and what part was each?
It was not because of what he was doing to me, because I had already decided and had pretty much splintered off from my family and tried many times. I decided at one point I don't want another cent. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I tried to be self-supportive. I'm going to marry this girl and go have my own life. And it was my mother actually telling me, okay, you do that, but it's not because of what your father is doing. I want you to know that. That would anger me and bring me back in to help her out, because I realized she was so disillusioned and fucked up over the whole thing, that she would actually think that. If she would have just said, I realize it's really strenuous, your dad is really doing all these things, it's terrible, I agree with you, maybe you should go off and do your own thing, it would have been a lot easier for me to do it. I needed her agreement that there was a problem, and there was none. And I didn't think about it for a long time until Erik and I would get together and we would share what was happening in the family, and it was obvious.
See, there's the reference to what was happening in the family, but nobody talks about what was happening. You don't say the words because it's shameful. You just say, we were talking about what happened in the family.
My mother was deteriorating. We didn't want to get to a point where my mother killed herself and we were left to deal with my father. That would be too hard on us almost, because I wouldn't want to. It would be hard on my father, and yet I couldn't let him get away with this, with what I would consider a murder that there was no way anyone would ever find out about. Mm-hmm. And so for my mother's sake, I thought that we did it. We had to come, like I was saying before, we had to make a decision. It was one of the harder ones, and it was a separate issue. Okay, these are the reasons my father should be killed. There's no question. What he's doing is impossible to live with myself, and for myself based on what he's doing to my mother. And
what were the things that he was doing? It's obvious to me that he was doing all kinds of stuff, from totally controlling everybody in the family, being completely cold-blooded about his decisions, considering everyone as sort of an instrument of his own will. And there's a lot of stuff that your dad was doing, including talking about disinheriting you, or actually, as he said, they did disinherit you, I guess, at a couple of points.
Well, that didn't enter into it too much, because I felt like Erik and I could handle it, mm-hmm. and he would expect us to handle it, and we were strong, and I still felt he was an ideal father for the longest time, because I felt like our dad can't be with us, and he's strong, he's overpowering, but he gives us advice. Fathers who are friends to their sons, and in his words, like Wimpy, don't give. And he teaches us to be a man, and almost that he had raised us to be able to handle doing this thing that was necessary, and that we could deal with it better than any other 18 or 21-year-old in the country. Because he had trained us like basic training. My 21 years was a basic training course on how to survive and how to do what was necessary.
To survive by living without him, or by telling him to leave?
By living without him. Mm-hmm. And that
because you would never have lived with him anyway. I mean, you never had that father-son closeness anyway. There's no. He had trained you mainly by being a disciplinarian and being tough, not by having a loving bond with you.
Exactly. Or to survive without having. I felt a bond, though. I felt like I would go back and forth as to whether I was close to my mother or my father. When I really started to see my mother's problems, I'd be much closer to her. I hate my father, and then I'd get away from that. And when he had the problem, the heart condition, and so on, I went in and I watched the Super Bowl with him, and we were close. And after the Calabasas issue, he cried, and we were together, and we were close. And the first time he ever cried in front of me, and he felt much more uncomfortable. I used to feel very uncomfortable and cry whenever he told me he loved me, because it was an unusual thing. concerning anything emotional without getting too emotional myself. And then it changed. And he became the one that, as I became more comfortable with it, I could bring up the fact, I love you and I'm doing this for this, and he could not handle it. Couldn't talk to me about it. Didn't want to deal with anything like that because it became a genuine emotion. If I expressed a genuine emotion, he would close up, and it would have hurt him. Like it would be a chink in his armor. He couldn't withstand it, and he cried after the Calabasas issue after I said that, Eric, no, very sorry, and I'm sorry for all that trouble that you were caused through this whole issue. And he cried, and he felt for everything, and I think he cried a lot after the Princeton issue. And I came to him and said this and that. But with me, it was very cold. That crying I never saw. He would be very upset if I saw him crying or anything. Then don't cry. And so it came down to that decision, and we decided that my mother could not live without my father. And it was sort of nice for me to hear my cousin Sylvia.
Why did your dad have to die? I know from your mom why he had to die. How about for the two of you? What? It's clear to me how much he totally controlled the two of you, and it's also clear he was when he talked about you when you weren't here. He was very he was derogating about.
So Dr. Oziel also treated his parents, which is also a conflict of interest. You shouldn't be treating multiple family members separately unless, doing it in the same session and it's a group session. It's like, who is he? He's got a side, definitely. And it's the parents.
Both of you in different ways. I mean, he would be judgmental of you in one way and judgmental of you, Eric, in another way. And it was real clear that at the same time he was saying he expected you, quote, to be men, that he was treating you as if you were disappointments and if you weren't strong enough. And that you were weak in one way and you were weak in another way. And I don't know if that came across and if that was part of what you felt in your relationship with him, that you could never be good enough, you could never do enough.
Sure. He even told Erik that the Calabasas issue and the way he handled it terribly. If he were in charge of it, he could have handled it way better than Erik. He made all kinds of mistakes, and you don't know how to do that either.
And so it wasn't even so much what you did, it was more that you were stupid in how you did it. You did it in an inferior and confident way.
But I still don't think it had.
So he wasn't so much mad at them for burglarizing these homes. It was that he was stupid about it and got caught, probably, is that he wasn't successful at it.
Anything to do with killing him had nothing to do with us. It had to do with me realizing a number of things that all culminated, which was, and could have culminated at any point. And it was just a question of Erik and I getting together and somebody bringing it up and us realizing the value in it, which was, my father had the dream of now going into politics and it was becoming apparent, and my mother would not be able to handle that. She had expressed over and over again how that would be the worst thing in the world for their relationship. What she wanted was for him to get away from his business and his dictatorship life with business and stressed out and all this other thing, and just sort of retire with her and be with her and get to know her. And if he went into politics, she would again be that shell of a showcase for him, and he would be boom, 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 be very busy, be time-consuming, and that would be his new love, politics instead of business, instead of her.
Instead of an affair.
And it would be his sort of affair, really. He had almost said, I felt like, and now I feel like, he had.
I've noticed many times Dr. Oziel says something and Lyle will be just like, yeah, and then he'll elaborate and continue on, like Oziel's leading questions or comments. He just incorporates it easily into his story.
Giving up women and taking up politics. It was his new affair, just something that would be his passion. He was passionate as well, very passionate man, but not with her. He had expressed in the letters there was no passion. And yet, on the outside, everyone thought that their relationship was all passion, all consuming. And it was crazy. But my feeling was that with him deciding to enter into politics, it was her doom. It was over. There was no escape. And Erik and I were he was on the verge of going to UCLA.
No escape from what? When you say no escape from what?
No escape from being separated from my dad in an environment, or in a relationship where she had no identity, and she was basically she was being battered, and he had taken. She at least felt comfortable in Princeton, New Jersey, and he knew that. And she had her friends, and she had a bonding and a relationship, and she was busy. And he took her out of that and brought her to California, and Erik and I knew it was devastating for her. I mean, it was really her death there. And if he went into politics, it would be another one. And it was just one blow after another, because moving to California was just the worst thing in the world, and he knew it. And
for him, for her,
for him it was great. He didn't care. It was just continuation of his career and this and that, and his wife was obviously going to go with him. There was no question. He made a thing where he would fly back and forth to New Jersey because he realized that this was a serious thing. His wife might not be able to handle this. I think he realized that. It was obvious, but he was very careful. Kitty, you're going to love it here. Come on. And Kitty was very sincere about the fact, I don't even know why she left. If there was a time for a divorce, that would be the best time to pursue.
Isn't it weird that he's referring to his mom as Kitty? He's calling her by her name, her nickname, what the name she went by, instead of mom.
Because she had a real bond there. It was a real emotional breakup with that community and her. And she had never had a friend out here, had one friend or whatever, and never really saw her that much. And she never inquired into tennis lessons or leagues or community things or nothing. She got involved in this house that Dad was building, and that was it.
So we're trying to push her into those kind of things, and for something she just
and she would say, no, there's not enough money, I have to spend it on the kids.
Yeah, push her into,
She believed.
Community activities. Don't you think she was probably too depressed and felt too powerless?
She was too depressed, and yet but she also, and it's an interesting thing Erik just brought up, she believed, Dad had her convinced, and it was an amazing day when this happened, that they had no money. That he had her convinced that they were poor, and that she could literally not afford to take tennis lessons and do different things for herself and buy herself nice stuff and never get a leather jacket for a couple hundred. I was buying leather $100 jackets on the allowance I was getting easily, and she said she couldn't afford one. She wished she could get one. And I remember a day when I said, come on, Mom, because I had bought something, how can you say I can't afford this when Dad just got a stock bonus of worth $6 million? And she said, and she had no, and his salary is $1.3 million, and she had no idea.
He didn't know the finances of the money or of the family. She didn't understand that he had way more money than he was letting on, like millions.
She said, what's that?
Hold that thought. I'm getting the notice from the little dog to take them out, so I'll be right back. Sorry, we're back. And I accidentally clicked out of the window, so I lost where we were. So I might have gone back a little bit, but I think this is where we stopped at. So sorry if it's repetitive.
When Dad just got a stock bonus of worth $6 million, and she said, and she had no, and his salary is $1.3 million, and she had no idea. She said, what's that? What do you mean his salary is $300,000? Or whatever it was.
So he totally controlled her.
And she said, how do you know that? That's not true. And because we're cash poor. And I was shocked, and I said I knew it because I worked with the company, and it was right in the stock letter, which I didn't read, that said he got this much stock. And sure, his salary was $300,000, $500,000, but his bonus every year was $850. No idea. She had no idea. And she didn't know about the life insurance thing that came afterwards. So I realized that he was withholding tremendous amount of financial information for her. My feeling then was, well, it's obviously in case they get a divorce, he doesn't want to know her to know what she's worth. But that enabled her to never buy anything, never do anything creative like that.
You see, when you said that, I think you're right about that, but there's another part of it, which is it also enabled him, again, to never allow her to have, I mean, your father was a totally controlling man, which meant that in the relationship, like you said, he needed to make all decisions. He needed to have her completely subservient. He needed to take all the will out of her, all the identity out of her, so that she was basically nothing but an extension of him and a shell of a person. So one way of controlling somebody so that they never develop any sense of identity. You tell them they have no money. They can't buy things. They don't have the ability to go and do community activities. They don't have the money to go out and develop an identity. It's a way of keeping total control of someone. So it wasn't only controlling the flow of information, but by telling her that they had no money, it was also a way to keep her totally imprisoned and totally unable to develop any strength. If she had a sense of money, she might have also had a sense of freedom. She might have also had a sense of being able to leave, to get away from him, to.
As much as I don't like Oziel, he's not wrong about this. If this is the case, if Jose was controlling her financially, he's not wrong about his assessment here, but I still don't like Oziel.
Escape him. If she had a sense of no money and no power, and emotionally she was really stripped of all of her identity, then he would put her totally under his control, which is real clearly what I think ended up happening with your mom. So I think you're right that your dad, in case he got a divorce, didn't want to know how much money he had, but I think even more, your father's whole instinct.
Okay, so they had to flip tapes way back in the 90s, remember?
To just completely control you. He used money and power to control you. He used money and power to control you, Erik, and he used it absolutely to control your mom. And I mean, isn't that really after all? Isn't that what it was about, Tony? I mean, wasn't it about the amount of absolute
He's trying to give them their own motive.
control and the ruthlessness in terms of just completely almost being like an automaton who was focused on I mean, it's like, do you think your father had any sense of what he even was doing to you? Or do you think that your father basically was so much on automatic pilot in terms of being focused on control and domination that did he not care? Or do you not know? What do you think? Erik, how about you saying something here? You haven't said a whole lot. What do you think? I just don't like hearing it. What does that mean? I don't like hearing it. You don't like hearing what? I don't like hearing these things about my father. Yeah. What do you feel? Upset. Yeah. Hurt. Sad what? Well, I pushed them out of my mind. And my father and my mother were two people that I love, and I just don't like that. It doesn't matter what they were or what they actually were. Whether it's a fantasy or it wasn't. They were very apparent in my mind before this and led up to the fact where I had no choice. I would have taken the other choice. Because I look back on it and realizing when people are worth and so very much regret it. I may not have had a choice at the time, but I regret it now. And I simply I like the image that I had from when I was 14 or so, where I had a mother and father that loved each other and loved me, and it was that kind of relationship. And I try to bring that back in my mind. It kind of like it was like that, and I like that. And it's simple and deep, and I don't like hearing my father put in this sort of way. It's too painful.
I I think if he admits that what the other people are saying about his father is true, then the way he's been feeling about his dad and the essay that was going on is validated. And it's scary to him to be validated because then he has to admit that those things really did happen. That's my assessment of that. I'm not a therapist, but that's kind of what I take from that.
He was somebody that I loved, and almost had no choice to do what I did. And I hate myself for doing it. And I understand why it was done when I came rationalized it. Because, there was a love that I had for my mother, and how it was such a misconception of the family, no one else, that no one understood, and how having to listen to the fights, and simply the yelling and the screaming always taking place downstairs, and finding blood on the bed and different things. I just tried to rationalize it. I break down every once in a while because it's really difficult. I love my father, and I love anyone like him. And it's more difficult because of my mother, because I realize what an amazing tragedy of her life was compared to what it could have been because of my father. And I hate him for that. And I love him. And it was something that was beyond control. And
What was beyond control? Did you have to tell me?
eventually it had to happen. It was basically ruining my life and I guess lives. And it was putting another through torture. And it got to a point where he was amazing. And he would do great things for me. And I wouldn't understand why. I know that she loved me. Somehow he just
Could I ever tell you, sure? No. I was there. I remember when your mom called me and told me that your dad was disinheriting you because he really didn't like how you were behaving in the table. And he thought you weren't being respectful enough. But he couldn't tell you because he never talked about feelings and he wouldn't talk about feelings. And, I remember telling you that and you didn't even look that surprised. I mean, that must have been what your dad was like to me.
Well, I'm sad because I look back on my life now with my parents, and I wish it would have been so much more different. I look back and I wish that my mother and I would have had an extremely close relationship, and I would tell her everything that happened over. I would tell her everything. And all my relationships with different people and everything. She wanted to know, and I was raised that I couldn't tell her. That she couldn't express to me, and I wish I had a closer relationship with my father. The dreams that I have. And
You couldn't be close to either one of them.
no, I just was very good relationship. From an early age, it's just, I guess, we taught to go father, and you don't
You just don't want it.
have a close relationship.
You just don't talk about feelings and what's going on.
You keep it inside.
Did you ever try to tell your mom or talk to your mom about what your dad was doing?
No, I couldn't face that. I I left that up to my brother. I couldn't.
She would have denied it anyways if he had told her, because the cousin, Vandermolen, Diane Vandermolen, I think is her name. She's the older cousin who was staying with them, and he had pointed to his privates, or I think it was Lyle actually, that had said something about his privates, and she told Mrs. Menendez that, somebody was touching his privates and pointed to his private area. And when she told Kitty, she reacted very much like, no, 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 you don't know what you're talking about. Jose is wonderful, and you just don't understand, and blah, blah, blah. And it was never talked about again.
Face that. That is what I told my brother over the phone, and he handled. I couldn't. I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to realize it. But I knew that if my mom had died, I would have to leave. I would have to leave. And it didn't matter because I always thought in my head that I could make all this money where it wouldn't make a difference. All right? I didn't, leaving wouldn't be a problem. I would have to do it. And I couldn't live with them anymore. And I love them. And I guess I was taught to love him because he was your father. And because I wanted to love him. And I guess that's why Lyle cannot probably face the fact that my mother had to be killed. And it was the only way out. It was the only way out for her, and that's why he cannot even face it. And he knows that feeling about it, and he goes, if you would have to face that and understand that, it would kill you, because it's just so sad. And I don't know, it annoys him. I'm pissed off that he was like it. In other ways, I'm glad that he is such a strong person, but I really can't say whether I would have wanted another kind of father. I just wish the relationship would have been. And I don't. I mean, I have all kinds of things about it.
How many of you think Erik has PTSD? This is now the third reference to dreams that he's having. He's either having dreams about a perfectly loving and wonderful family, or he's having these other awful kinds of dreams.
And there was a dream where I was trying to convince two of my friends to shoot me. And they wouldn't do it. No matter how I would try to convince them, so I took the gun that was in my hand and shot myself several times in the heart. And then I died. And there was a moment where it was just an immense pleasure. I was happy, and there was no tension on my mind, there was no stress, and everything was calm, and everything was great. And then I woke up in the morning and I was upset that I was alive, because of the great feeling that I had when I was no longer alive.
What kind of feeling?
There was feeling there was no oppression, and there was no more sadness to be had. And you no longer had to feel sad about your parents. And because it's just illness. And I guess one of the hard things about it is that everyone now, they don't know the truth, and they can't relate. And that's difficult.
You can't relate to any of the feelings you have.
Exactly.
And there's so much pain, and it's so clear that both of you are relating to the, not so much to the pain that you had in being in the family, although there was a lot of pain there. You both knew you could escape that. You were about to go away to school while you already were away, but the pain of knowing that your mother was going to be left behind and victimized, and that she was so defensive and protective of your father that even while she was being totally destroyed by him, that she was blocking absolutely even your love for her, and you're trying to help her, especially you, Lyle, trying to talk with her, that you were blamed for it. Here you were loving her and trying to care for her, and instead you got blamed for it, and there was an absolute denial of what was happening, and yet you knew the pain she was in. You saw her totally deteriorating, and I mean, it's almost like, I mean, your love for your mother was, and the pain with her getting just totally brutalized over all those years was like it was a lot worse than the pain you went through being with your dad. Well, you thought you could deal with your dad more than your mother. Your mother couldn't deal with your dad. Your mother had no ability to deal with your dad.
Back going to college, I mean, it didn't matter. Even if I was in college, I remember when I was in college, I wanted to major in theater. And my mom wanted me to major in theater, but couldn't tell me that because she was an actress and she was a great actress. And so she had this love for theater. And when she saw me on stage, and I said, Beverly, she loved it, and she wanted me to major, but I couldn't even bring it up to my father. I did once, and it wasn't, well, he thought I was kidding. It wasn't even something that was going to be even brought up. And my mom certainly never bring it up. And so what I was doing and what I was taking, I wasn't even going to decide. It was my courses, when I had an hour or two to select my courses, I would already have the sheet and already have it worked out. My dad would have already worked out what I was going to take. And
His dad was picking his classes for him before he could even do it.
and so, I mean, it wasn't, if it was freedom in my life, kind of, but my life would be structured and I would have freedom outside of structure. Right? And I mean, in signs of pain, I mean, Lyle and I definitely had different kind of relationships with parents in different ways. And certainly dealt with it differently. Like I got scared with Lyle. When I wasn't sure. Lyle and I really didn't talk about how each other was feeling that much after this all happened. And we talked about getting ignorant about our feelings. And he probably relates more to me because we weren't supposed to. The parents didn't care. And he told me that he was very depressed and so on. And I didn't know it because, we hadn't talked about it. He was showing his feelings are different from mine. He was open about it. And I got worried. What is depression mean to Lyle? And could that mean he killed himself? And I cried about that one for a while.
Have you ever tell Lyle before? Is this for 10 Lyle knows him?
Yeah, I don't.
Why don't you look at him and tell him that you're really worried about it? Eric. No, come on, look at him. Tell your brother. Eric. No, don't be tough and strong. This is what you're trying to undo that happened.
I'm not being tough and strong, I know.
No, but he needs to tell you.
No, I mean,
Well, let him do this. He needs to do this. And you know what? This is part of your way of undoing what happened in your family. Eric needs to express his pain his way, and he needs to tell you how much he loves you and how concerned he was for you. It's really important. I know you're stepping in to sort of save him, but you know what? The best way for him to really be able to save himself and for you to get closer and to have that contact is for you to be able to talk to him. You couldn't talk to any family. But, Eric, can you turn towards Lyle and tell him what you feel? You can do it.
Is it normal for therapists to force their patients to do things? Just wondering.
There's a reason to.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. Come on. This is what it was all about. The reason this was all about, what this was all about, was you not having done this in vain, but for you really to get to the place where you can deal with the feelings and not be a prisoner of whatever happened in your family. So, yeah, there's a reason. You love life?
Yeah, we express each other in different ways.
But you love life?
Yes.
You told me that between the two of you, if one of you was going to die, you'd rather you die and that Lyle left. Did you say that? Did you say that?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think?
Maybe that didn't work out effectively.
I agree that Eric and I need to I was very close to Erik, and we made all our decisions together, and when it came to advice, he came to me first. Just
I
like,
remember how hurt you were when Erik told me what happened, and I remember the hurt, the pain. You said he didn't talk with you about it first, and you felt really violated. And that was real painful for you. I remember that.
yeah, the worst thing about it was for them. There's so much. It could be something. It's just like the tragedy of the family. It could be another tragedy if we don't be very close, because and tell each other things first and so on, and trust that we care. It's very hard to trust that you care. We've been taught to deal with it ourselves and then go a roundabout way and let up when it's necessary. If he feels it's really important for me to get this, he'll push that for me, but without me really knowing the real reason why he's pushing for me, that he loves me or whatever. And then we'll get real stubborn and hate each other about some little issues that I wish we wouldn't. I'll figure he'll think, or I will figure my girlfriend more over an issue than I do himself. Or I'm very conscious of his take sides with somebody else, over myself, and then I'll say, well, screw you. You don't care, and it's easy for that to happen, and that's something that would be great if it could be worked out about. We've sort of worked out some strange relationship where we can convey that, like you said, without having to say it face to face.
Why don't you say it face to face right here, though? Why do you feel so good?
Because you've never been taught to.
Well, when? Turn your chest towards each other.
Well, you've never been taught to. No.
Erik.
No, I feel like comfortable. I'd rather know.
Erik. Wait. Okay. What am I here for? Aren't we trying
For some reason, it seems like I can say it to almost anyone else except for my family.
Okay, but wait a minute. You're trying to learn how to handle that and trying to undo that. You've got one family.
I think it stems from the reluctance stems, and the mind stems from a pride issue. He's still afraid that I may not feel the same way, and pride will become. That's the way we tell myself. Yeah, I love Erik very much.
Can you feel a little more cousin?
I feel like too.
Oh, God. Come on, you can do this. I know you
We hate that hugging shit, by the way. We fucking hate that.
You know what? I don't care. I don't care if you do it. Just because you said that. Come on. No. You know what? You may have trouble with it. All right. Come on. You have trouble with it. You do. You know what? Look, all the stuff that happened, if you want to reverse the fact that you couldn't be close, if you let me, okay, what I want to do if you let me, okay, and you trust each other enough and you trust me enough, I don't want to have this be something where we're doing something that has to do with legally protecting you, because that's not what we're doing here. What we're really doing is trying to help you undo what happened and help you create what never got created, so that what happened for a reason, and that you now can create something between the two of you that was supposed to be there to begin with, because you're what you have left. You're your family now, and you don't want to be a victim anymore of what happened. And I know how much Erik loves you, because you were not here. Is it okay if I tell him that? All right? He just nodded and said yes. He told me that if something happened, if anything happened and one of you had to die, he would much rather it be him than you. He would much rather that, if something happened to him, he doesn't even, Erik's got all kinds of problems with having anything to do with any money and anything as a result of all this. Feeling real guilty and badly about it. He's having all kinds of difficulties with it. And, he said to me over and over again how much he loves you, and how much he would really do anything for you, and, including marrying. If the point of the had to go, he'd rather it would be him. And I know that it's not easy for Erik to tell you that with words, but you know what? You're talking about you being real sad with your mom. But it would be just as sad if the two of you didn't get to the place where
I feel like that almost has happened a couple times. It's obviously happened twice. Once where I was depressed and could never really convey it, and always close to suicide, and felt it would be the best way out and a nice way out. And wishing that somebody would be good enough to have me killed. And then there was a time, then Erik also going through a period where he never expressed to me that me saying that I was in Princeton, was going to stay in Princeton and go to school and not be part of the tennis tour would be emotionally devastating to himself. And his reaction is, okay, fine, if that's what you want to do, do it. I don't think it's fine. And that's it. And me actually being hurt by the fact that he didn't care enough to say that he wishes I was on the tour. And so we both walk away majorly depressed. That he doesn't care if I'm on a tour or not. He just makes the wrong decision intellectually. And Erik is not going to get a tour with me. He doesn't care. And, that... And it can lead to suicide. And, just like, it led to my mother. And I still think Mom's was a suicide. Because, I feel that in her letters to Erik and I, she gave me the permission. And the burden seemed to continually be handed to me. Erik handed me it to talk to Mom. Dad handed a lot of things to me. She had given me permission to please carry out her suicide. And that it was obvious that she had decided in her mind she wants to die. She can't do it. And she doesn't want to talk about it. And there's nothing that I can do to help her. There's nothing anyone else can do. And she very much doesn't want anyone else to know. Doesn't want me to go to her Uncle Brian. Or if I look back, I wish I would have done. And just said, I feel like if I would have said to Uncle Brian, this is the situation, he would have done something. I feel that I have a lot of anger toward my relatives, my uncles, my aunts, my Uncle Carlos and Aunt Terry, who knew about what was happening to my mother and did nothing. I just think that they were cowards, that what Erik and I did took courage beyond belief, beyond...
I get why he says that. He grew up in the house. He knew what it was like. But his Terry and what's his name? I forgot now. The uncle. Um, whatever his name is, I can't remember. He just said it. Carlos and Terry Brault. He was mad at his uncle and aunt because he said that they knew what was happening to his mom. They might not have known the extent. I guarantee she was downplaying it, if even expressing anything at all to her family members. So I'm sure she was ashamed and feeling victimized and feeling that guilt that comes with being abused. So she wasn't going to go to her sister and be like, hey, this, and this is happening and help me out here. No, most likely she's still a horrible person, but she's also a victim of Jose. So she's her own abusive personality in and of itself, but she also was a victim of Jose. So that's what they're saying that they're mad about. But to be fair, Kitty was an adult. Kitty made her own decisions. Kitty could leave if she wanted to. I mean, she didn't know that she could. She didn't feel like she could, but she could. So it's kind of, I mean, coming from Lyle's perspective, he's angry at the aunt and uncle for not doing anything when really they did try to intervene. They did try to do some things, but it just didn't work. And there's only so much you can do for an adult who doesn't want your help or doesn't want to get out of the situation that they're in. So while I think Lyle's feelings towards his aunt and uncle are extremely valid, I think not coming from it's coming from a limited perspective from his perspective, his point of view. But when you look at it, from the broader scheme of things, what really could they have done besides, I mean, what were they going to do? Force Kitty to leave him? She wouldn't. So, she would have had to be by force. She refused. So I don't really know what they could have done more here in this situation.
Knew about what was happening to my mother and did nothing. I just think that they were cowards, that what Erik and I did took courage beyond belief, beyond strength. There was no way I was going to make a decision to kill my mother without Erik's consent. I didn't even want to influence him in that issue. I just let him sleep on it in a couple days. Because I'm in a very good position to influence Erik on a lot of things. Because he knows that I care and a whole number of issues, and I can talk eloquently and whatever. And but when it came to that issue, I wanted nothing to do with it. It had to be his own personal issue. He felt the same way I did about killing Mom. And I feel angry toward my relatives. Why didn't you do something when you knew what was going on and I didn't? And now when I found out, I did something about it. I did what I thought my mother would want me to do, which is please kill me. And I can't, and I just couldn't just kill my mom, and that would be ridiculous. I wanted to get rid of the source, so I couldn't live with that. Nobody could. And in a way, I'm happy that people say afterwards, there's no way that your mother could have lived without your dad. I'm glad, even my mom's side of the family says, I'm glad that if your dad was going to be killed for business reasons, that they were both killed. Even knowing what I know about it all, and the people that do know it all, my mom's side of the family doesn't, they think it's because they love each other so much, but my mom's side of the family, Sylvia and a few other people that have read some of the letters and know some of the stuff, feel the same way, that she couldn't have lived. She wouldn't have wanted to live. She wouldn't think of it as I wish she would think of it as, I'm free, now I can take.
It's almost like he's justifying the reason or justifying it to himself based on other people's validation.
The money go back to Princeton, I can recover and remarry, which is what I wanted for it. It was only after that ceased to be an answer, ceased to be a way out, that it was a dangerous situation where Erik and I realized at any point, sort of subconsciously, the go-ahead was given to kill us. Kill me before you leave. Basically leave our lives and go your separate ways.
Was she rushed to the hospital?
You mean after the car accident?
No, when she took too many pills.
So when was it?
That's what you told me about.
New Jersey?
Yeah.
Back in New Jersey, yeah. Took a long pill or something, and went back with rushed to the hospital for some reason or another, but the New Jersey stuff, I didn't realize what was going on. I was in high school. I was dealing with my mom on a daily basis, and it wasn't as bad as when I was no longer around. She had something to occupy her time. All of a sudden she did. Erik wasn't on. So things got really, really worse. She didn't know about the affairs then, I don't think.
No, she didn't know about the affairs, I think, until she...
And it was bad enough that she was really having a hard time dealing with her marriage just because of what my dad was putting her through without even knowing that he was putting her through it for a completely devious reason. She was in bad enough shape, and everybody, my tennis coach, who was sort of a psychiatrist for me back then, Fred Warner, would say, Dad, I really feel for your mother. She opens up to me a lot, and she's just tormented by her father, and I would hate to have her life. Her life is terrible. And your dad is just a typical serious business executive, and he mentioned over and over that my dad could be having affairs, and I dismissed it entirely because I didn't think my dad was capable of that. And but getting back to what Erik was feeling that I wanted to say, it would be great if we were able to work on it, because even our relationship, because even the planning out of this, the reason it took such a short period of time to figure it out was, one, because it could have happened at any moment. All the thinking beforehand was done, really.
Yeah, I knew what you felt.
We knew what we felt, and we knew everything about that. Honestly, I never thought it would happen, even though I had thought about it. But it was done so quickly and so sort of callously almost, because one, if you thought about it too much, the feelings of not having your parents around and so on would get in the way of what was more important, which was helping your mother, really. And thinking about that and feeling toward her was so easy to separate yourself. I'd done it for too long into your own life and go, I don't want to deal with my mother's agony. And it was sort of a cowardice way out. And for one moment before I went back to school, I had a chance, even though my life was going really well, and to show some courage, I felt, and help Erik and I, help my mother. Time, I'm doing well, you're ready to go to UCLA, we're psyched about a lot of things, but we can't ignore the fact that my mother has to live with us. And it was that. Erik was that. I mean, I remember when we had to go down wherever to take care of an important issue concerning it, he said, I can't do it, I've got to practice because I have a tournament coming in. It was completely blocking that, and I was, I couldn't even tell him, but I was feeling, he doesn't realize the impact of what he's doing. He wants to take care of this problem and wish his life was the same and he still had normal parents that he can never have. He doesn't realize that what he's doing, there will be no more tournaments like that. There's going to be no more, all the little good things that are in a relationship. And I think one of the biggest pains he has is that you miss just having these people around. I miss not having my dog around, if I can make such a gross analogy. That, whether I hated the thing when it was around now, and I've given it away, now that it's gone, I miss all the things. That we had a boating trip right before the incident, and I had
So he's sort of saying he's regretting things. Like he didn't appreciate what he had when he had it, and now that the thing that he didn't like is gone, he's missing it and wishing it back into his life. Like the good things anyways.
nothing to do with the main problem, which required a lot of courage. But I miss not having my father, and it's almost worse after I find out more and more about how he was such a genius and all the things he was able to do, and more about the agony of my mother. That instead of her being a shell, I realized she was really feeling a lot of emotion. But I wish I could have now confronted her and discussed things with her that I can't, and I didn't know and think I would ever have to do.
At the end.
All right, the tape has been played, and it's around 8 minutes to the hour. Let's take our lunch break, and we'll resume at 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't.
So the tape has concluded. Like they said, it just abruptly starts and ends. There's no in between. And there's no transition, no like introductions, no reason why the purpose of this tape is being recorded. They didn't know. They didn't know. And that's extremely unethical. So we're not done though, because Dr. Burgess and Dr. Conti are going to continue and analyzing this tape that we just heard. We have about 40 more minutes in this part, and we've got at least 2 more parts after that. So just letting you know where we are.
Form any final opinions about it. We'll see you all back here at 1:30.
Yes, I both supervise and I also supervise and make sure that the other instructors that supervise and instruct the other students in the division, I'm responsible for that.
So you're above all of the instructors, all of whom are also supervising. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, how do you supervise a student giving therapy? Do you actually sit in on the therapy sessions, or is there some other method?
No, I did not sit in on the sessions, but we require our students to audio tape every session that they have with a patient. Some students also are videotaped, and some students are, there's a one-way screen where they have an earphone that is plugged into the supervisor behind the screen so that the supervisor can give immediate feedback during the session.
So that if the student therapist does something wrong or misses something, the supervisor sort of buzzes them and says,
That's right. Well, we buzz them and say what is, either they've missed something or go back and explore this, whatever we're trying to convey, so they can correct it right during the session.
Okay, but would it be fair to say that most of the supervising of the students' therapy is done by reviewing the audio tapes that they've made of the therapy sessions?
Yes, because students have multiple patients, so that becomes the easier way of doing it with the numbers of patients that students carry.
Okay. Now, in addition to listening to the audio tapes, do you also review the notes that the students make of these therapy sessions?
Yes, students must also bring in copies of their notes so that the supervisor has a copy and the student has a copy, and the supervisor has already listened to the tape. That has to be provided prior to supervision.
Why is it that the students have to do notes when everything's on audio tape?
Because they need to learn how to take notes, what are the important things to capture in a session, and you have to really advise them and teach them how to do that. They also have to write reports, so that there's even an added factor to the work with the patient.
Now, when you're teaching people to be therapists, are you teaching them how to listen to patients?
Yes.
And what is the key to how to listen to patients that you Is it the same, for example, as a police officer listening to someone they're interrogating, or is it the same as the way a jury listens to a witness testifying, or is it somehow different?
It's somehow different. The listening, first of all, listening is a very critical therapeutic tool, and it's almost more important than what one says. You have to be able to listen at multiple levels, because people are coming in and in their discussion or they're talking of their problems or whatever they're in the session for, the therapist must be able to analyze at two levels, both what's called the content level, what is actually being said. But equally important is to get at material that is not being expressed, but may be alluded to through various techniques that people have of talking.
Is it your experience, both as a therapist, and of course you have functioned as a therapist for many years?
That's correct.
And as a researcher in the field and as a teacher, that patients do not just come into a therapist, sit down and say, here's my problem, here's my real feelings, here's the dynamic of my life?
No, they do not.
What's the therapist's purpose? I mean, a lot of people don't even believe in therapy, but what's supposed to be the purpose of the therapist?
The purpose of therapy is to look at the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of a person and to be able to pull all of that together and keep the meaning and the understanding, for patient understanding, sometimes it's called insight, as to why people behave as they do, why they talk or feel as they do, and to give the patient an understanding of these components of their life.
Now, when your students do these therapy sessions with their patients and you are analyzing it, are you grading them on what they do?
Yes, we do grade them.
Do you reject people from your program if it appears they simply cannot develop appropriate therapeutic methods or techniques?
Yes, we do.
Now, did you come back to testify at this point in order to give us your opinion, in part, of a particular tape recording in this case?
Yes, I did.
And is that a tape recording of December 11th, 1989, which has as the speakers L. Jerome Oziel, Lyle Menendez, and Erik Menendez?
Yes, I did.
And did you, how many times have you listened to that tape?
I've listened to the tape, I think 5 or 6 times.
And even before you testified the last time, when you were here for your first appearance, had you read a transcript of the conversation contained on that tape?
Yes, I had.
And did I ask you to analyze the information on that tape from the standpoint of whether or not it was, based on the standards that you teach, a competent or adequate or appropriate therapy session?
Yes, you did.
And did you form an opinion on whether or not what went on there fit the standards for a therapy session?
Yes, I did.
And what was your opinion?
My opinion that it was unacceptable as to meet the standards of psychotherapy.
And what were the reasons or the basis for that opinion that it is unacceptable?
There are several reasons. First of all, there is no identification on the tape as to who is on the tape. There is no consent given by either of the two patients that are being taped.
On the tape.
On the tape, right. And that is something that should be there because you are taping them. There is no ending. There's no timing. There's none of the factors that go into just the mechanics of taping. Second.
Let me stop you for one moment. You testify a fair amount in court cases, do you not?
Yes.
So you have extensive what's known as forensic experience with the court system.
Yes.
And is it your understanding that Dr. Oziel had said to the Menendez brothers, strike that. You were here yesterday for the testimony of Julian Smith.
Yes, I was.
And you're aware that she attributes to Dr. Oziel a statement that he tried to make the Menendez brothers think that he could help them if they ever got arrested, and that this tape would somehow be useful.
Yes, I heard that.
And are you familiar with the standards of in the forensic psychological field for preserving evidence or preparing evidence for presentation in court?
Yes, I am.
Now, you have just described a problem with the form of this tape. It doesn't have any introduction. It begins in the middle also. I mean, it begins in the middle of something.
That's correct, yes.
And it ends in the middle of something.
Yes, it does.
And does that violate the standards that you're familiar with for evidence, for forensic evidence to begin
Yes.
with?
Yes, it does.
Does it go beyond that, though, and even violate the standards for the preservation of psychotherapeutic material?
Yes, it does.
Now, apart from the format that this tape is sort of just starts and ends, is there other things based on what is actually said and done on this tape that led you to your opinion that it was unacceptable as a therapy session?
Yes.
And would you tell this jury now those things?
Well, some of the things are what are done by the therapist on this tape. For example, changing the subject. That is a violation in terms of you're supposed to elicit the information from the patient and work with the patient's material and use the patient's language. So even introducing language which would be leading and suggestive is not considered good technique in psychotherapy.
Which is just about every time he steps in and talks, he's interjecting his own opinions and his own analysis.
Aspects in the tape in which you can see the control being used by the therapist.
By Dr. Oziel?
Correct, by Dr. Oziel. There is a part about halfway to 3/4 of the way through the tape in which there is a technique that he attempts to use in which both of the brothers protest it. They don't want to do it, and yet it is done over their protests. And not only is it done over their protests, but the therapist also laughs at them and completely disregards what their feelings are about this particular face-to-face technique.
Is that face-to-face technique what you and I have referred to as the touchy-feely part? Lyle, look at Erik. Erik, look at Lyle. That thing?
Okay, counsel, let's not argue it and just ask the question the proper way.
Is that touchy-feely part?
Yes, it is.
And given the context of everything else that's being said on that tape, did you find that it was appropriate at that point in time when they're discussing the killing of the parents for Dr. Oziel to do that?
Objection, improper opinion.
Overall.
I felt it was inappropriate, yes.
Inappropriate.
Inappropriate.
Now, you've indicated it was over the protest of the two patients, of Erik and Lyle Menendez.
Yes.
Okay, and that's on the tape. They're saying they don't want to do this and they're protesting it?
Yes.
Do they, however, nevertheless do it?
Yes, they do it.
Now, you said that one of the things that you criticize about this tape is that the therapist is being suggestive, using his language, he's leading, he's controlling. With respect to this part, but not just this part, do you find any evidence of him being a manipulative person in the context of this session?
Objection, calm down.
Overall.
Yes, I do find him manipulative.
But what does that really mean in this context, that the therapist is being manipulative? What's he doing?
What the therapist is doing is to get the patient to do what he wants him to do, rather than allowing the patient to present and conduct the session as freely as he possibly can.
And in your experience and in the way that you train your therapy students, is therapy in one sense a search for psychological truth, if you will?
Yes, for the person's truth, the aspect that the person is presenting, yes.
And are you likely to unearth psychological truth if the therapist is manipulating the information, is trying to get patients to agree with him rather than following up on what they're saying?
Right. It does not go towards the patient. It is only serving to fulfill the therapist's needs.
So are you likely to find out the truth in this kind of a situation?
No.
Now, apart from what you've already said, were there parts on this tape where there were what you would consider to be clues, pieces of information that should have been followed up, and metaphors?
Yes, yes. Those are things that we also teach to the students to look for.
You teach the students to look for such things coming from whom?
Come from the patient.
And are they supposed to, when a patient says something that seems to have significance, follow up?
Yes, precisely, to get into that, to explore it more, to expand the thoughts, feelings, and of the patient.
Okay. And was that done here? Were there clues to underlying feelings that were not followed up by Dr. Oziel?
Yes, there were.
Were there metaphors that one or both of the brothers used that he did not explore?
Yes, there were.
Would you explain for this jury what we mean by metaphors in this context?
The metaphor means that the patient has referred to usually to someone, either someone within their own context or to someone that is well known outside of their context. It's just the identification of a person. And rather than being able to talk about really what they're thinking of, they just make this, they make the metaphor. And it's up to the therapist to find out what the real meaning is to the patient.
But is that sort of, just to give it an example, is that sort of akin to when someone calls up a mental health provider and says, listen, or a lawyer or a doctor, listen, I have this friend who has a problem.
Yes.
And really what's going on is the person themselves has a problem, but they're distancing themselves from it.
Yes, because they don't know how the person's going to react. And until you really know how the therapist or whoever is talking, they won't be able to fully admit that it's really their concern.
Okay. And did you find even in the very first page of the transcript, in the first opening moments of what's on this tape, Erik Menendez using such a metaphor?
Yes, I did.
And what was the metaphor that he was using? Who was he talking about?
The metaphor had to do with John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, and he's referring to this right in the, I think, line 3 or 4 of his first opening statement that comes on the tape.
And does Dr. Oziel follow up on this reference to the Kennedys, or does he immediately change the subject?
Objection, pause for proper opinion on the part of the witness.
Sustain.
Now, on the face of it, does Dr. Oziel ask any questions related to what Erik has said about Bobby Kennedy, Jack Kennedy?
No.
Objection, the tape speaks for itself.
Overall, the answer will stand.
And is that an example of a metaphor that he does not follow up on?
Yes, that's one example.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes. We now have both juries in the courtroom, and you may continue with your direct examination.
Dr. Burgess, at 2 different times today, you testified in front of the juries that you were critical of the method that was being used by Dr. Oziel on this tape of December 11th for a variety of reasons. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And one of the reasons you said was that Dr. Oziel is suggesting things and using his own language and not following up on what the patients are saying.
Correct.
And do you see a pattern in this tape of points at which the patients, Erik and Lyle Menendez, agree with the suggestions being made by Dr. Oziel?
Yes, I do.
And do you see other points when the patients, and most particularly Erik Menendez, disagree or ignore completely what Dr. Oziel is saying?
Yes, I do.
Now, what I propose to do, strike that. When you do your analysis of your students' therapy, you're analyzing, on the one hand, their technique. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Are you also analyzing it from the standpoint of whether or not, based on their technique and how they deal with the information that a patient's giving them, whether or not you could have any confidence in ultimately the information that's developed in one of those therapy sessions?
Yes.
And did you make the same kind of assessment with respect to this tape? That is, whether or not you could find the information on the face of it, if you will, content coming from Erik and Lyle Menendez to be reliable?
Yes, I did.
And what was that assessment?
Objection, proper opinion.
Would you rely upon informing your opinions, any opinions, in a forensic case, information developed in what you consider to be an inappropriate therapeutic setting.
Objection. Same objection.
Sustained. Take what you mean.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Are you mindful, having listened to the tape 5 or 6 times, having read the transcript many, many times, of what the ultimate story is that's supposedly put forth on this tape as to why Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were killed?
Yes.
And what, as you've read it and listened to it, is your belief in what that story is that appears on this tape?
Objection. Irrelevant.
It's foundational, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Well, Your Honor,
Foundational. Why don't you ask the next question? I'll see if there is.
well, let me just, maybe if I ask this as a leading question, I can move on. Does it appear from this tape that what the brothers are agreeing to is that their mother was killed in some form of euthanasia or mercy killing?
Objection. Proper opinion.
Sustained.
Your Honor, it's not being
Speaks
asked.
for itself, so.
Well, I'm not sure it does. That's the
Yeah,
point.
that would be her characterization, and it's really irrelevant. So ask the next question.
Do you find from analyzing this tape that you are presented with a theory for why these parents were killed that makes any psychological sense to you as a therapist?
Objection. Proper.
I was supposed to say, being a lawyer has got to be hard. You're sitting there fighting with the judge and trying to ask the right questions and making sure that you're wording the questions correctly so the annoying prosecutor doesn't object. Ugh, I feel for Leslie right here. But I mean, she doesn't even let it like bother her. She's annoyed with the judge, obviously, for always sustaining the objections, but she just shifts gears and keeps moving forward, which I love to see how lawyers can do that because I couldn't. It's amazing to me that they can be so adjustable, so flexible in those situations, and remember how to ask or word a question or what questions to ask at that time.
Again, it goes beyond the nature of the examination that we indicated at the sidebar.
Well, let's try it this way then. In trying to determine whether or not what appears on this tape is reliable, okay? Oh, I'll strike that. Did you try to determine whether or not what Erik and Lyle Menendez were saying on this tape with respect to supposed motive for killing their parents was the truth?
Objection. Proper opinion.
You can answer that question, yes or no.
Yes.
You were trying to determine that.
Yes, I was.
And is examining the method by which the information is, to use the word loosely, developed on this tape important in your making a determination as to whether or not it's the truth?
Yes, it is.
And is it understood in at least the teaching community, training therapists, that if the method used isn't appropriate, you're not going to get the truth?
That's correct.
Okay. What I propose to do at this point then, Dr. Burgess, you have a transcript in front of you that has your notes on it, correct?
Yes.
What I plan to do is go through it and have you point out those areas where you take issue with the methodology that's being used and for you to give the reasons for what's wrong with what's happening at these various places on the tape, okay?
Yes.
All right. So let's...
An objection to this is improper opinion.
I haven't heard the question yet.
All right.
I thought that's what we just decided.
Let's ask a question.
Okay, now you've testified in front of both juries that in the very beginning, when the tape starts up, the voice that's on the tape is Erik Menendez.
Yes.
And he's making some reference to the Kennedys.
Yes.
And you've testified there was a metaphor in there. He's referring to Bobby and John Kennedy was, I think you testified in front of the blue jury, some form of identification on his part.
Yes.
Identifying with
Yes.
Bobby and John Kennedy. Mm-hmm. And you're not making the interpretation, are you, that he identified with them because they wound up dead?
No.
But is that something you would have wanted to, at least as a therapist, pursue?
Yes, this is the area you would want to pursue.
Why is he talking about the Kennedys?
Yes, because it's the very first major theme that comes up in this tape.
Okay, now you don't know what might have preceded this in the many hours that Dr. Oziel and the Menendez brothers were together.
That's correct.
All right, but you can only deal with what you got.
Right.
For some reason, somebody turned the tape recorder on here.
Objection. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Well, obviously somebody turned on the tape recorder.
All right, it could have been a tape recorder was already on and a tape was played and recorded, another one put on, so that's
Oh, there
speculation.
might have been other tapes.
Excuse me. Rhetorical comment.
Let's ask another question, please.
Have you had any information that there were any other tapes made on this particular day?
No.
So the judge just brought up the fact that there could have even been more tapes that we don't know about. Holy crap. This judge stepped in it there, I think. He should just be quiet.
Okay. Now, does Dr. Oziel, and now I think all the juries, does the gold jury have their transcripts? Everybody should have a transcript.
All right, assuming we have a sufficient number of transcripts.
We do.
All right.
We kept the ones that the gold jury had last Friday around.
Okay, we did have a certain deficit in number.
We have some.
That's the audio. I can't do anything about it. It cuts out occasionally. Let's see.
Okay, if everyone has it, then we're on page 1 right now, correct? And starting at line 19, that is the first actual thing that Dr. Oziel says after Erik has been talking about first the Kennedys and things he says about himself and his brother, whatever they became, et cetera, et cetera. Now, does Dr. Oziel, at this point, follow up in any sense with anything that Erik has just said?
No, he does not.
And what does he do?
He changes the subject.
And when he changes the subject, how would you characterize the manner in which he is talking to these patients?
He really begins to give answers for them. He talks about his ideas about the family. That's what the next several lines are.
Now, if you turn to page 2, you note on page 12, Dr. Oziel makes the suggestion that the only people within this family that, for whatever his theory was, were left to have a bond were the two brothers.
Yes.
Now, how does Lyle react to that statement of Dr. Oziel's, as you see on line 15?
Objection to proper opinion.
Are you asking what was said?
I'm asking, well, I'll lay it down. Not what was said, but what does he do from what you can see here, verbally?
Objection to proper opinion.
It's not an opinion.
Well, the words speak for themselves. What is
Well, does he agree with this suggestion of Dr. Oziel's?
Objection to policy speculation on the part of the witness.
Overall.
He does not agree. He continues. What Lyle does is to talk about the suicide note.
Well, let me call your attention to this. Dr. Oziel suggests the only people that were left to have were a bond were the two of you.
Yes.
Then do you see Lyle saying, well, he, meaning Erik, found the first suicide note. That created a huge bond there, picking up on Dr. Oziel's language.
Yes, they are.
Objection leading.
Overruled as to that question, but let's not lead the witness.
Now, is this something that this is Lyle picking up on some language Dr. Oziel is using, is that correct?
That is correct.
And is this a pattern that you see repeated through this tape?
Yes, it is.
Where Lyle agrees with things that Dr. Oziel is saying?
Yes, he does.
Now, do you
I noticed it several times, but I was also looking for it. So if you're looking for it, it's easy to find. It's a good thing we had that little brief intro in the beginning with Dr. Conti and Dr. Burgess to let us know what we were supposed to be looking for.
notice at the bottom of page 2, oh, by the way, have you ever conducted therapy with more than one patient at a time?
Yes, I have.
And do you train people in conducting therapy with more than one person at a time?
Yes, I do.
And is there any training on the subject matter of whether you should allow people to constantly interrupt each other?
Yes, there is.
And what's the protocol?
You're not supposed to have people interrupt other people.
And are therapists supposed to interrupt patients in order to get their own ideas across?
No, they're not.
Let's look at the bottom of page 2. Do you see line 28? Erik Menendez is talking?
Yes.
And what happens there?
Objection calls for a speculation on the part of the witness. The tape speaks for itself.
Sustained.
Did you notice in hearing the tape that he was interrupted there by his brother?
Same objection, Your Honor.
All right, we don't need to have these objections each time. It's clear that counsel is asking or pointing the witness to a particular phrase for purpose of follow-up questions.
Correct.
Objection overruled, but if we can get to the question itself.
Right. Is he interrupted by his brother there?
Yes, he is.
And is that a pattern that continues throughout the tape, that Erik Menendez is interrupted by his brother and by Dr. Oziel?
Yes, it is a pattern.
Until the second half of the tape.
That is correct.
Now let's turn to page 4. And you can see there on line 6 is at another point at which Erik Menendez is interrupted by Lyle.
Yes.
Now, you had talked that one of the things that's wrong with this as a therapy session is that there are clues and hints being dropped that are never followed up by Dr. Oziel.
That's correct.
Calling your attention to that portion between line 7 and line 11 by Lyle Menendez on page 4, is there something there that you characterize as a clue that was not followed up?
Yes.
And what is it?
The statement that you couldn't tell anybody, that you couldn't identify some of the people he couldn't tell, that's not followed up on. Not over who you couldn't, but what you couldn't tell.
And is that significant when you're talking to a patient where there's been an extreme traumatic event, when that patient makes some reference to inability to tell or secrecy?
That's right.
Moving down the page, we're going to skip that until later. But down the page until line 25 on page 4, is that another point at which Erik is being interrupted, this time by Dr. Oziel?
Yes, it is.
And right after that is Erik talking again, and again interrupted by Dr. Oziel?
Yes, it is.
And when Dr. Oziel interrupts on these parts, does he interject? Does he interrupt to ask to follow up with what Erik is saying, or does he interrupt to put in his own theory?
He puts in his own theory.
And is that what he does at the top of page 5?
Yes.
Now, do you see on page 5 at line 17, Dr. Oziel saying, when you ended up killing your mom, did you feel like you were sparing her?
Yes, I see.
Is that a significant point in this supposed therapy session?
Yes, it is.
And why is that particular point so significant?
That's an example of where he is suggesting, he is leading, he is putting his own ideas forward, his own theory, if you will, forward.
Is this the first time, in fact, that the whole issue of killing one of the parents is raised?
Yes.
And it's raised by Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And besides asking the question, the suggestion in the question, did you feel like you were sparing her, does he then go on to do something else that you find is inappropriate?
Yes.
And what does he go on to do?
He then goes on to describe his opinion of her being depressed, totally dominated. He uses language shell of person. She had no identity or strength. And he ends with the word that she was pitiful.
And is that appropriate for a therapist who's trying to actually find out what patients feel or think about a person to give his analysis?
No, that's not appropriate.
Now, right after that, Erik Menendez makes a statement with respect to the mother. Okay?
Yes.
And would you characterize that statement as generally agreeing with what Dr. Oziel has just suggested or disagreeing with it?
Objection to proper opinion.
Overall.
In that line, he is talking about both mother and father and making a statement that does not agree.
Does it disagree, though? He's saying there was no way she could live without my father. So does that somehow tie into the...
Yeah, it ties in, it adds to it, but it does tie in with that preceding statement.
And the preceding statement is the beginning of the discussion on this tape of the so-called mercy-killing theory. Is
Yes,
that
it
correct? Now, turning to page 6.
So that is Oziel's theory, is that she was a mercy ending. But that's not, and they only kind of adopted that and continued talking about it in the therapy session because Oziel had been leading the conversation to that point.
Now, in this statement by Lyle Menendez that begins on line 4 and ends on line 7, is there another clue there that is not picked up on by Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And what is the clue in that statement?
The word is problem. Eliminate the problem. What
And-
problem?
Excuse me?
Yeah, the question would be what problem? That is not explored.
That's what you would ask if you were a therapist. When someone's talking about eliminating a problem, you'd want to know what it was?
Yes.
Dr. Oziel doesn't ask, does it?
Correct.
Now, there's then this discourse starting at line 14 on page 6 by Lyle Menendez where he's talking about his mother's problems from the past.
Yes.
And you recall it takes a while to develop it in this tape, but at some point it's established that all of this heartache and misery...
Okay, let's not lead the witness.
Is there a point in this tape where the timing of this problem of the mother is established?
Yes.
And when is it that all these conditions and feelings and troubles of the mother are dated to?
It's dated to 1986-87 time period.
Your Honor, Mr. Strikers on foundation.
All right, again, would you establish that this witness is referring to something on the transcript?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do
All right,
before, Your
why don't
Honor.
you do that?
Okay. Do you recall at a point in this
Maybe if Mrs. Bozanich will stop objecting to every question I have, I can get through this line of questioning, Judge.
transcript, Dr. Oziel asks Erik, when was it that he finds the suicide note and he has to listen to his mother crying, all of that? Do you remember that exchange?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
Erik says it was the first year that we moved here in 1987?
Yes.
And that's in this tape?
It's in the tape, yes.
Okay, and that's how you know what the dating of the
So
problem
again,
is?
you're leading the witness. Let's have her testify about these things.
Okay, well, we can take the time then, and we'll find out where it says it on the
Maybe
transcript.
the witness can find it.
Go ahead. Go on. Let me find it. Well, first let's go back to this. You see on page 3, on line 23, Lyle is talking about at the point when Erik found the suicide letter, he was living alone in New Jersey in the mansion that they had left.
Yes, it's on page 5.
And the other reference is on page 5.
Yes, 1987, line 16.
And that's when Erik is saying that the mother's misery dated from the year they first moved out here, 1987.
Yes.
Okay. So the problem as it is presented by Lyle Menendez on page 6, what he's talking about, has to do with 1987.
Yes, it does.
And as a therapist, if a patient is telling you that he had to solve a problem and and the problem existed in 1987 and he's claiming to have solved it in 1989, would you ask, I thought this was 1987's problem, what's going on in 1989?
Yes, I would.
Do you see anywhere in this when either of the brothers is talking about the mother's misery and the mother's old problem, if you will, that he ever asks, wait a minute, that's all stuff from 2 years ago, what's going on in 89?
Overruled.
He does not. He does not get a time dimension.
Well, does he ever ask, but what's happening just before?
No, he doesn't.
Now, is another significant thing that a therapist should follow up on what's called, and you're going to have to define this, negative transference?
Yes.
Okay, very briefly. What is negative transference?
Transference has to do with the feelings that exist between a patient and a therapist, and you can have positive or negative. And essentially, the negative would be for the negative feelings that are generally evoked from a prior relationship.
Okay, let me see if I can interpret that well. So if I don't like a significant person in my life, let's say I've had a lot of trouble with an older sister who raised me, let's say, and I'm in therapy and I'm being hostile towards my therapist, is it a sort of accepted notion in psychotherapy that what I may be doing is taking the hostility from the relationship with the older sister, transferring it to the therapist?
Yes. But essentially, and they're both negative and positive. You could look at that relationship both from either way. But negative is always the negative feelings.
And is it limited to really significant relationships? I mean, if you're mad at your postman, you're not negatively transferring that to your therapist.
No. The feelings are generally to caretakers that have had the most contact with the person in their formative years.
Someone in authority, the way a therapist appears to be, isn't that the basic notion?
Yes.
Here's another authority type person.
Yes.
Is there an example here on page 7? Line 18, that's sort of a combination of both a metaphor and a negative transference, if you will.
Yes, it is.
And what is the reference there?
It's a reference to she was the worst psychologist ever.
Okay. And the she that's being referred to there is the mother?
Is the mother, right.
And why did you find this significant?
Because Dr. Oziel is a psychologist, and this is being said to the psychologist, and this would be something that would be very important from the transference aspect.
Do you think, did you interpret this to mean that Lyle Menendez was accusing Oziel of being a bad psychologist?
He's expressing his feelings vis-a-vis the mother and is expressing certainly negative aspects towards Dr. Oziel. We don't know what they, I mean, you can't see what they are with that one statement, but it needs to be explored.
And if you would explore it, could it lead to discovering hostility towards the therapist?
Hostility, there could be a lot of other issues, trust, safety factors like that.
To deal with the issues of trust and safety, what's the significance of patient trust and patient feelings of safety in attempting successful therapy?
Those two elements are critical for there to be successful therapy.
Why is that?
Because if a person does not trust or feel safe in a situation, they're not going to be able to open up and to tell a person what's really on their, either in their thoughts or in their heart.
You're not going to tell the truth, in other
That's
words.
correct.
Okay. By the way, on this same page, page 7 at line 17, is there another example of Erik Menendez starting to say something and being cut off?
Yes.
And did you see the same thing happening on page 8 on line 16? Now happening to Lyle Menendez, where Dr. Oziel is cutting him off.
Yes, I do.
And do you also see here that right after Dr. Oziel interjects and makes the suggestion about the timing of something, that it comes after an affair, do you see Lyle Menendez using the same language as Dr. Oziel?
Yes, I do.
And the word he's using is affair.
It's the affair, yes.
Now, starting on page 9, this is in the middle of a time, just to orient you, Lyle Menendez is trying to explain to Dr. Oziel how he tried to be supportive of his mother and talk to her about the treatment that his father was giving her, and to commiserate and to offer her help?
Yes.
Okay. And has he indicated, he being Lyle Menendez, up until this point, page 9, line 7, has he indicated any hostility whatsoever in the four corners of this towards the mother?
No, he has not.
And now, does Dr. Oziel start to do something verbally here? And you've heard the tape in tone of voice as well. Does he try to do something that you found was inappropriate?
Overall.
What is he doing that you found was inappropriate?
Well, what he's actually doing is labeling a feeling, and he's trying to lead in terms of did you actually get angry at the words that he uses, and states that as his...
So he's trying to characterize the mother as being hostile towards Lyle?
Yes.
Okay, Lyle hasn't said that yet?
That's right.
Okay. And, in fact, he still doesn't
Okay, counsel, let's not lead.
Okay. Do you find in the next statement by Lyle Menendez, does he pick up on Dr. Oziel's language here, or does he continue to say what he was saying?
No, he picks up on Dr. Oziel's language and then continues to describe the mother.
Okay. And you turn to page 10. At the top of page 10, does Dr. Oziel do something verbally that you thought was inappropriate at line 3?
Yes, he does.
And what is he doing here?
He again is bringing in the anger feeling, and
Whose anger this time, though?
Lyle's anger.
Okay, so now he's
Moved from the mother,
being angry at Lyle.
to now Lyle's anger.
And has Lyle up until this point indicated that he was angry at his mother?
No, he hasn't.
And when Dr. Oziel asks him this, how angering was that? First of all, is it appropriate to suggest to a patient that they were angry or had hostile feelings to someone when they haven't even described that?
It is not appropriate, and you should seek the question from the patient. In other words, you should say, how was that for you, or what. You should never lead and label a feeling because you don't know what that feeling is.
And how does Lyle react to that?
What Lyle does is he's taken back, and you can see him, he isn't even, it takes him a minute or two, actually 2 statements, to get this focused in. He says, what? And then to me, and then he's able to affirm, if you will, the anger. He does that again. It was extremely angering for me, so he adopts that language.
When a patient appears to be taken aback, that means that's not where their head was going?
That's right.
Something's being suggested to them that they weren't thinking about.
That's
Okay,
right.
again, let's not lead.
Okay. And so Dr. Oziel asks the question twice.
Yes.
And then does Lyle say, oh, it was extremely angering for me, and then explains what he means by that?
Yes, he does.
Based on his explanation, in your opinion, is he using the word anger appropriately there?
He is, no, I don't think he's using it appropriately. I think that he has another feeling tone than what was suggested to him.
What is he describing there if it isn't anger?
It's really frustration.
And now on line 15, does Dr. Oziel do something that you found was inappropriate?
Yes.
What is he doing here?
What he now attempts to do is a manipulative type of situation to pit them against the mother, and he starts taking that tact, and he even he describes them as, and he ends with, as if you were an ingrate, so that he takes information and uses it in the context of what he's trying to set up.
Okay? And does it appear from what he's saying is that he's trying to get them to say that they were angry at the mother or had hostility for the mother?
Yes, he's been trying this for now 2 pages.
And he tries to get Erik drawn into this as well, doesn't she?
Yes, he pulls on line 20.
And does Lyle agree with him?
Yes, he does.
And is this the pattern that you see throughout, that Lyle is being agreeable with Dr. Oziel?
Yes, this is a pattern.
Let me call your attention to line 9 on this same page, where Lyle is saying it was extremely angering. She was putting me in the position to defend the things that my father was doing to me.
Yes.
Okay? Now, would you consider that a cue when you're talking to someone who has admitted that they have killed this person?
Yes.
Would you want to know what things?
Yes.
Is there any follow-up, any question about what things?
No.
In fact, Oziel says, uh-huh. Is that appropriate therapeutic method when you've been presented with a statement like that?
No.
Now, here, you notice on line 22, in this, what you've described as a manipulative section where Dr. Oziel is trying to foster this hostility, do you see he uses the word as if you were an ingrate?
Yes.
Has Lyle Menendez said, my mother made me feel like an ingrate or anything like that before Dr. Oziel uses this label?
No, that's new language.
And that's Oziel's language.
And that's Oziel's, yes.
Now, what is Dr. Oziel doing? How would you characterize what he's doing at the bottom of page 10, starting at line 24?
What he appears to be doing, what he is doing is to try to get Lyle angry. And he's saying a lot of things about whether he's getting angry at what was being done.
Then I need to strike that speculation part.
As to the intent of Dr. Oziel or the
Yes.
reaction of the
The intent of Dr. Oziel.
objection sustained to that portion of the stricken.
You see in this little speech of Dr. Oziel, starting at line 24, that he's saying basically negative things about the mother's behavior.
Yes.
And these are things that Lyle Menendez himself has not said.
He has never said those.
And is he characterizing it in such a way that she's being a bad person and Lyle was just trying to be helpful? I mean, trying to create a hostility.
Yes, he was trying to create hostility.
The objection is again sustained. The answer is stricken.
Was there an objection?
It's the same question you asked before.
Well, I was trying to give a foundation for
All
it.
right, you still have it.
There was not
Is
an
it appropriate
objection.
for a therapist to...
Let's hear that again. I didn't hear an objection. It's totally improper for a judge to cut off a witness without an objection.
the way that she's being a bad person and Lyle was just trying to be helpful. I mean, trying to create a hostility.
Yes, he was trying to create hostility.
The objection is again sustained. The answer is stricken.
Was there an objection?
It's the same question you asked before.
Well, I was trying to give a foundation for
All
it.
right, you still have it.
Is it appropriate for a therapist to characterize to a patient his relationship with another person in negative terms when the patient hasn't so characterized the relationship?
No.
Is that suggestibility?
It's suggestibility, and it's, yes, and it's leading.
Let me ask you a hypothetical. If the therapist was not intending to give therapy at all, but was trying to get the patient to say negative and hostile things about a dead person, is this a useful method to do that?
It could be considered that, yes.
Now, after Dr. Oziel has said these negative things about the mother, looking at line 6, does Lyle agree with him and say negative, hostile things about the mother, or does he do something else?
Right, no, he does not agree with Dr. Oziel, and he, in the next line, blames himself and has regret and concern.
He says,
I wish he had tried harder with his mother.
so even though Dr. Oziel has sort of made all these excuses for him to be angry at his mother, he says he wished he had tried harder.
Yes.
And do you notice on this page 11, line 15, a portion where Erik starts to say something and is again cut off?
Yes.
Now, do you notice, starting on line 24, another one of these cues or clues that is not followed up on by Dr. Oziel at all?
Yes, I do.
And what is what you could consider a clue or a cue in there?
The statement, there was no way I could open up to her about the real issues, so that real issues is hinting that there is something more to be explored.
And of course, as Dr. Oziel said, what were the real issues?
He doesn't say that.
Now, is there, on page 12 at line 11, there is a statement by Lyle Menendez. And does this statement relate to any, based on what you've seen here, does it seem to link up with anything Dr. Oziel has been saying?
Yes, it does.
And what is the significance to you of this particular statement of Lyle Menendez's?
What's important about this statement, and Lyle Menendez does have this in there, is that he refers back to what Dr. Oziel has mentioned before, and it is the theory on the mother and her misery, and that being a possible reason.
The mercy killing.
The mercy killing theory, yes.
And Lyle says specifically here, like you mentioned before?
Yes.
Now, do you know if, based on just reading this document, if Lyle there is referring to what Dr. Oziel mentioned when he postulated this theory earlier on this tape, or whether he's referring perhaps to what Dr. Oziel said on October 31st or November 2nd, or any other prior conversation?
There is back, it could be all three, but in this particular situation, there also is language earlier
By Dr.
by Dr. Oziel.
You just like to take a look in your
Well, the way it's answered, she's just indicated there is reference earlier. The answer will stand. It's not
There's
speculative.
no reason to strike it.
Next question.
Now, is there a point on this?
It makes you wonder too, because this is still the defense's case, by the way. The defense chose to present the tape, not the prosecution, when they could have. The prosecution had it too. They had every opportunity to also present it in their case, and they chose not to. The defense was playing it in their case because it helps them. So obviously, in certain ways on their theory, and that it totally delegitimizes Dr. Oziel in the same like in the same manner. So it's like twofold. You get both. You help their defense and also help get rid of Oziel's testimony. But where was I going with that? So this is the defense's case. So it just makes you wonder, why does the prosecution keep objecting? They want it out so badly, and all these questions, which I don't think are improper by any means, they just keep objecting and sustaining, which I think is BS. But these things that she's asking, it's content of the tape. Why can't she ask that? I don't understand. It's evaluating the conversation and from a perspective that is looking at it in a like a psychological assessment, or using standard protocol for a psychological assessment.
Particular page on page 12. Let's strike that. Let's move ahead to.
You know what? This is where I'm going to stop it, actually, because we are right about like the 1/3 part. This whole tape is like video is like 8 hours. So I'm trying to break it up into a couple different portions for us. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I did want to also mention I am working on a deep dive for the tragic death of Sandra Birchmore is the name of the series on my playlist. If you followed along at all or know anything about the Karen Reed case, there are some of the same players involved, the investigators, some of the same cops involved in this case. And Sandra Birchmore was groomed and essayed by three Stoughton police officers, at least three Stoughton police officers that we know of, and one of them was the father of her baby when she was found to have allegedly taken her life, when now we know most likely, as a new forensic pathologist has told us by his evaluation, it was not an accident, or not done by her own hands, but it was a homicide. So with that series, I'm looking into her death. We're looking at all the different officers, but I did just put out an episode last night regarding warning signs, red flags of grooming behavior and predatory behavior. So if this interests you, it's a really good topic. There was a lot of overlay, and I used this trial as examples for some of the things because there were so many examples in this trial of ways in which predators will groom and manipulate and um, mistreat their victims. So I will link that to this video so you guys can, or I'll put it in the description. I don't know, one or the other, probably both. So you can check that out. And I will see you guys on Thursday with the continuation of the discussion, the breakdown of the Oziel tape from the defense's perspective. So I will see you guys Thursday. Take care. I'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye now.